Good evening. Welcome to the Sherwood City Hall. I will now call to order the City of Sherwood Budget Committee meeting for May 12, 2016. Kathy, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Chair Andy McConnell,
Here?
Vice Chair Mir to Mayor. Here. Susan Claus. Here. Amy Kutzke. Paul Mayer. Here. Kurt Studer. Here. Mayor Clark. Here. Council President Harris. Here. Councilor Browse. Here. Councilor Henderson.
Here.
Councilor King.
Here.
Councilor Kuiper. Here. And Councilor Robinson.
In the other room.
Nice.
That's great.
Is that everyone, Kathy?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Before we get started with the agenda items, I have two items I'd like to mention. First off, a small rule: if a motion is made to vote on an issue, we're not going to be doing any voting tonight, so doesn't apply. Tonight's session is going to be more of a working session and a listening session and going over line by line in a more intimate setting than we've had in years past. And toward the end of the evening, which will end at 9 p.m., we will have the meeting open for public comment. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the testimony forms and submit them to the Finance Administrative Assistant. The committee chair will recognize those persons wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed through the committee chair. And we'll mention that again as we get closer to the time for public comment. The first order of business for tonight is to approve the April 7, 2016 minutes. If everyone has had a chance to review the minutes, are there any questions or comments to make about the minutes? I will entertain motions to approve the minutes.
I second.
So there's a motion to approve and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Minutes are approved. Moving right into new business. The first item is the election of the committee chair. Mr. Gall.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to read a statement because there is a ORS that requires us to do this action tonight. We always have not been consistent in years past, so we want to be in compliance with state law. So per ORS 294.4149, the Budget Committee is required to elect the presiding officer at the first meeting where the budget message is being presented. I would like to request Chair McConnell to open the floor for nominations of the chair position for the FY 2016-17 budget cycle. And you can request nominations from the committee.
I so open the floor. Any motions to nominate a chair for as Mr. Gall explained?
I nominate Andrew McConnell.
Second.
And there's a second. All those in favor? Aye.
I was going to nominate someone else. Aye.
All opposed?
I don't know how it works. I was going to nominate another person, so.
Oh, are there any discussion
works.
before we move to vote? We'll do that. I missed that point.
I don't know how it works, so.
Well, there's a motion and a second. So if there's a call for discussion, now's the time to bring
Well,
that
if you want to
up.
nominate
Yeah,
somebody
you
else.
can.
I was
Go ahead.
going to nominate Mir Meyer, since she did the vice, that it might be a good opportunity for her to do the other. So. But I don't want to cause conflict.
Okay, hearing that discussion, I'll call again for the vote on the motion, or whoever can withdraw the motion.
Who was the original motion
The
made? by?
original motion was by the mayor.
Okay. So if you wanted to, Mayor, you could withdraw it because we have basically two candidates to be chair, if you'd like, or we can vote on the original motion.
Write on a piece of paper.
Okay, so if I withdraw my motion, do we then vote on the two?
Then
correct?
we'd probably vote on the two. I mean,
Okay,
this is
so I'll withdraw my
unusual,
motion and we'll vote on the two.
So,
That's fine with me.
Okay? So now that the motion's been withdrawn,
so actually, you had the original motion that's withdrawn. So Josh, I may need your help up here, so.
Well, actually, I'll throw a wrench in this.
Okay,
Okay.
Mirta, go ahead.
I'd like to decline.
Okay.
But I am flattered. Thank you.
Okay.
I
Okay.
think it's good to get fresh eyes, fresh
Yes.
people in.
And we have to
so-
select a vice chair, and I have a feeling I know
That's
who
true. I
that
have a
might
feeling
be.
that'll come
So
up. All right,
So
I'll
you can-
reopen the floor for motions.
reopen the floor and make your original motion
So
again.
I will move that we appoint Andrew McConnell as our chair.
And we have a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Okay.
Any
Okay.
abstentions?
I did.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a chair now. So
Thank you.
now I would like to request Chair McConnell to open the floor for nominations of the vice chair position for the FY 2016-17 budget cycle.
I nominate Mirta Meyer.
Second.
Actually, let me step back a little bit. I open the floor. I should not move. I open the floor to nominations. And I so move that Mirta Meyer be nominated.
I'm keeping my mouth closed, so.
I move that Mirta Meyer be vice chair of the budget committee for the cycle.
Are you willing to consider? Continue?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. And the motion was seconded.
Somebody gotta
I
do
do
it.
not remember who seconded that motion.
Paul did.
Paul did. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions?
Me.
Jennifer Harris abstains. The motion passes.
Thank you. We have a chair and a vice chair, making progress. So.
Thank you, Mr. Gall.
And for the newer members of the committee or that maybe have not been part of budget committee, the chair and vice chair always are citizen members rather than counselors. It's kind of been, I don't know if that's by Oregon budget law or not, but it's certainly been the tradition here and in other cities that I've worked in. So
All right.
But we have a visitor, and he is darn cute.
All right. Let's go ahead and get started with business. Joe, do you want to take the lead on the budget review?
yes, before we get started tonight, we have it's going to be, as the chair described, a little bit different budget committee than maybe you've experienced in the past for a whole variety of reasons. One is I have this young lady who is in the interim finance director position, so she and I have worked along with my staff very closely over the last few months to put the budget together. She has learned our budget while also trying to put the budget together, and so this is largely going to be, as we've described today to my staff, the Joe and Kathy show in terms of we're going to lead the discussion. We're going to look a lot deeper into the budget because I think that's what I've heard from budget committee members compared to past budget committees. So you have been provided a lot more detail than you've had in the past. So you've got where the back part of your booklet, the line item detail, is where we're going to spend a good chunk of our time. You're not going to see department heads get up and present, this is who we are and this is what we do and things like that. If you have those questions, I certainly encourage that. They're here to answer those questions. But we're really going to roll our sleeves up and look at the budget. And really, hopefully, will help educate you in terms of how we put the budget together. How do we get those large numbers that you ultimately are responsible for approving? So it's going to be a little different than in the years past, and I hope that it's what you are looking for. That's certainly our intent. Before we get started, though, you had some replacement pages in your booklet that I'm going to have Kathy go through and explain what they are and why we're asking you to swap out some sheets. So can you do that first, please?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, the first page there, we did both front and back, so it may look almost the same to you, but on the first page, it was the municipal court data for the budget detail. If you would swap that out, we had some typos on there that we want to get correct so that you would.
The budget, isn't it?
It is page 51 and 52. And then, so that is the first one with municipal court. Then next is are pages 63 and 64. And there we were correcting the information, I believe, on the field house and sports recreation. The FY17 column there. And
These are in addition to the pages that you gave us earlier to replace.
yes,
Okay.
yes, these were just handed out tonight. That's it. And then in the line item detail, it's pages 26 and 27. And that is on the police department there. There was a change there as far as how the overtime was totaling out. So we wanted to get an accurate sheet for you there. And then the same with pages 38, 39, and 40, 41. And that dealt with the overtime situation again, also too, for public works, facilities, and parks.
So you want to emphasize that it didn't affect the budget.
Right.
That
It-
you're reviewing.
Yes.
A lot of this was previous year information that wasn't being pulled properly.
Yes, either that or as far as the budget detail, all of the information, all the numbers within the budget detail are fine. There are no issues there. This was strictly on the line item or, as we say, typographical types of corrections that we're wanting to make or previous year. And then the last one is on the urban renewal district, and that would be in your budget, and that's page 3 and 4 to be the very back of your packet for the urban renewal district. And again, this was a change in the beginning fund balance in the 2015-16 year. Does not affect 16-17 at all. It was a hard-coded number that needed to be updated. There.
Yeah, I don't have that, the urban renewal stuff.
This
I have
one,
a page, but I don't have it in my.
you don't have the, okay, it was sent out. It was sent out to everyone via email.
Okay, so we were supposed to print it
So
off.
it might just be the, yeah.
And we're not going to talk about that tonight, so we can print
Yes.
it out and,
Okay.
and
We'll be, yeah.
make sure you get it. So
Maybe upstairs.
Maybe that's what it is.
So that should get everybody updated then.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
we thought it would be easier to actually try to do this together as a group rather than sending you all these pages and you trying to figure things out. So we apologize for the inconvenience. So,
What you have on the website now is all of the corrected
Absolutely.
correct,
pages. Okay.
Yes.
correct. Good question, thank you. So, I am not going to read word for word the budget message. Hopefully you will have had a chance, if you hadn't already, to read the budget message. We do want to spend a little bit of time going over the memo that you received yesterday,
Yes.
which is dated May 12th, and it's from Kathy. It's entitled General Fund Budget Overview. I think this is some important information. You know, as we've talked about this process, we're going to tell you a story basically from the beginning to the end. And after we tell you the story in terms of how we got to the proposed budget, hopefully it will make sense in terms of the decisions that we made, especially some of the cuts and some of the things that we did not fund. We'll get a chance. We have anticipated we'll have some healthy discussion about some of those cuts, but we want to explain how we got here first. And we've got 3 nights. So it's a long story. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to you to start. So
Okay, very good. All right, so first off, we have listed here the legal level of authority and resource discussion. And in order to help with that a little bit, if you would turn to your line item section, and we'll be looking at the first few pages there. One being first off, the FY16-17 proposed budget for all funds. And what we'd like to point out to you on here is the first yellow highlighted line for total expenditures. Basically, that is showing on a fund basis what the legal level of authority is for the City of Sherwood budget. And that's what you have to work with. You'll also have subtotals for the different divisions within the general fund, but again, coming back to that legal level of authority is what you are working within. And then if you come down and you look at the contingency is actually calculated based on 5% of operating revenues. It is your current year rainy day fund. It's set aside there for any emergencies, unforeseen expenditures, that type of thing. As you probably know, there are certain guidelines and very strong stipulations within budget law as far as how and when you can use contingency. But it is something that is set aside every year. It's 5% of operating revenues. And then the following line is reserve for future years. And that's basically all of your leftover money. And it is the correct way, according to Oregon budget law, on how you save your money and set it aside. If you are not wanting to restrict it for a specific thing, you put it into your reserve for future years. And one of the things that I want to show you as far as a point of comparison is that your total, the grand total of reserve for future years is almost $19.5 million. And that is equal or close to what your total expenditures are for 1 year of $22 million. So you've got a very healthy reserve there. Now that reserve, when you are looking at it from a fund basis, general fund would be considered unrestricted. But most of your other funds, there are a restriction for that as far as water reserve is spent on water, et cetera, that type of thing. But you really have got a healthy, strong reserve for future year balance there.
Kathy, question. So on the contingency, is the number listed here exactly 5%?
It is
Whatever number?
5% per fund for the funds that carry contingency,
Okay.
that have contingency, yes.
Okay.
So it's 5% of your operating resources. And so sometimes you have to look at it with a little bit of a calculation as far as exactly what is being figured on, but yeah. Over to the far right side under
There it is,
2016-17
thanks.
budget.
Yep.
That's essentially adding up all the different funds
Yes.
in terms of that reserve line.
Okay, is this the same as that 20%
No.
fair balance? It's not, this is in addition to 21,
How much money you have left over in each fund,
okay.
basically. Savings account?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a desired percent? Like,
20% is for the general.
General fund, thank you,
Yeah,
okay,
that's
but that's
in
not
general
this,
fund.
this is this reserve against future expenditures.
Yes, it's a good rule of thumb is 2 months worth, but it varies. It can vary all over the place.
2 months worth of each fund?
2 months worth of expenditures is usually considered a good guideline.
So when we get to the general construction fund, which it probably will not be tonight, it'll probably be next week, that fund balance or that reserve, 230,000, that's a little low. So the things that cause me to, and others to not sleep well at night, that's too low. That's not a lot of money to do stuff with. So someone says, we want to build a skate park, which could be a $300,000 to $350,000 expense. We have $230,000 sitting in our bank account. So I don't want to get into that now, but when we get to the general construction fund, that's a good discussion to have. Well, why is that so low? And how do we build that back up?
And what are the rules for if you wanted to get into the reserves for the future years? If council had a need or something, how does that function?
As far, it would just be appropriating out of it.
But council would have to.
Yeah, council would have
At the council
to.
level?
Mhm.
Would that be end of the year appropriations or
For your
trans?
following year budget.
Okay,
If
usually your contingency is where you're going to do your immediate, your rainy day fund for this current
at
year.
5%, okay.
And then the other would be for future years.
Well, that is confusing. So if we as a budget committee don't agree with this budget, and we instead want to take some money from these future reserves, can we not as a committee vote,
Oh, yes.
decline the budget as proposed and move that we instead authorize a budget of X?
Well, you don't even have to decline the budget as proposed because it hasn't been approved yet.
Okay.
So you can do whatever you want to this budget prior to approval.
Okay.
Once it's been approved, then it moves on to the.
So it doesn't have to be at council level?
No, what we would do in this committee level is talk through it, and hopefully by the end of the second meeting, we'd have directed staff to go and redo the proposed budget to include more funds for certain areas and less funds in the reserve areas. Then we would vote together at the end of the 2 or maybe 3 meetings, or maybe even 4 if we have to go that long, to pass to recommendation to council to approve the budget. So we have plenty of chances to make changes to this in these meetings.
Well, I was just clarifying that a statement, it was a misstatement that,
Well, I was referring
We-
to next year.
okay.
Yes, it would be with the next year if you have this, once you approve the budget and it's adopted. So those funds are in there. Then the following year, if the, board or the budget committee chooses to utilize them, it's just appropriating out of it.
And can I ask a question too? So for the reserve for the future years, only the general fund is unrestricted. The other ones are restricted. Are there earmarks within those restrictions where the money is specifically set aside for something? Or are we just saying this is overage money completely unearmarked?
I would say hold that question, because when we get
Yes.
to certain funds, the answer would be yes. So the one that
Yes.
people will jump out, and we'll get to it when we talk about the water fund, is why do you have $8.5 million sitting in the bank in the waterfront? There's a reason for that. And that's a great question. I just don't want to get into the water fund tonight.
Right.
We are here really to talk about the general fund. So hold that question.
Okay, and then, so for the general fund, the 1.9 million on that, is any of that earmarked, or that's just all savings?
Not that I'm aware of, but we can double check on that.
Yeah, it's not earmarked.
Yeah,
It's
not,
that 20%, we're trying to keep 20% or more, which we are, which we're going to get to show you where we are and where we're going. But it's not earmarked for specific purposes.
any further questions on that?
And this is a page I don't think, at least in the 3+ years that I've been here, we've talked about. So these are all good questions. So.
Oh, very much so. And then the next 2 pages, or actually 4 pages, 5 pages, these will show you where your legal levels of authority are within the general fund, which of course, as I say, we're focusing on tonight. So you'll see as far as total administration expenditures, the bottom line there of $2,554,000, which is a bit of a reduction over the previous 2015-16 budget. Community development expenditures, and it is down also too over 15-16. Police services, they have also got a reduction over 15-16. And total community services expenditures, that is up, which as we get to that division, you'll see as far as the reasons where there's been increases there. Public works expenditures, same thing. They are up a little bit, and you'll see the reasons. We'll go through the reasons as far as where they have increased. And then overall, general fund expenditures are down for this fiscal year over last fiscal year by about $450,000 overall. So that kind of takes you and illustrates to you exactly what the legal levels of control, how you adopt the budget, and where there is the maneuverability within it.
Do you want to get back to this?
Yes, yes. And then if you would go back to our memo that we discussed as far as the general fund budget overview. And this memo is basically, and as Joe's saying, I'm not going to read every bit of it. I'm sure, hopefully you've had a chance to read it. But basically what we do want to call out on this is that this is a presentation of a balanced budget to the budget committee. The one-time expenditures are included in the proposed budget. The department budget requests are not included in the proposed budget. There are some department budget requests not included in the proposed budget, and then the impact of the proposed budget and the future assumptions over the next 5 years. So we're also going to bring that out. Oregon budget law does require that the council adopt a balanced budget for each budget cycle. Balanced budget simply meaning that total resources equals total requirements.
And Sherwood does take a stricter approach to that, to the term balanced budget, by stating that it means that the total operating revenue is greater than operating expenses. The budget that's being presented to the committee tonight does accomplish all of these interpretations.
Out of curiosity, how much was the proposed budget on that initial cut that was proposed by the heads?
We would have $11,644,303 plus, we'd have to do a little math on that.
Okay.
So,
just over
Counselor,
12.
if you go to page 3, which we're not there yet, you can see the things that I cut to balance the budget.
Oh, okay.
Now, that only includes items over $5,000, so we made some cuts, or I made some cuts below that, but these are the major ones. That's $257,000 that it adds up to. So hopefully that helps at least give you an idea what we cut. So I think the important feature in this chart down here at the bottom is that when I'm trying to balance the budget, when I'm looking at operating revenue and operating expenses, so not one-time expenses, I basically have to come out on the plus side. So I have come out, the net normal operations were 47,000 to the good. Okay? So if the committee wanted to add something back that I cut, let's say the Washington lobbying firm of CFM, that's a $24,000 cut, and we'll get into that. You can add that back in if that was the only add, and we'd be fine, because that's an ongoing operating cost to the city. You could do that, and we wouldn't have to find savings anywhere else. If you wanted to add, as I think some may want to when we get to it, a $70,000 a year code officer, there's not enough savings there right now. We'd have to find another $25,000 to $30,000 in that. You couldn't take it out of one-time expense because it's not a one-time expense. If you're going to add staff, there's an ongoing cost year to year to year. And when we get to PERS and the costs of what we're going to be dealing with a year from now, you will probably, some of you more than others, understand why I cut that position in terms of being able to maintain any additional staff in light of the costs coming down the line in terms of PERS. I don't think it is prudent to add a staff member and a year later cut a staff member. So I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but that's the kind of discussion that we will probably get to when you want to add stuff back in. The first question is that an ongoing expense or is that a one-time expense? And that's what we do all the time in terms of putting this together.
It's an ongoing expense, you said, if it's within a certain amount? I
It
don't
has to be
understand that.
within, all of our ongoing expenses have to be less than $11.6 million. So depending on what you ultimately, as a committee, say, I think it's important that we add this back. I'm going to say, well, let's see, is that an ongoing expense or is that a one-time expense? And I don't think people necessarily realize that when we put the budget together. So, yes, Counselor.
Sure.
Yes.
Go ahead, thanks. So later on, after we've had a lot
Sure.
of discussion, and somebody picks something off of this list, which will likely happen, the money would come out of contingency, correct?
Not necessarily. So CFM, I'm using that as that's an ongoing, we've been using that lobbying firm for years. If we were to continue to use that lobbying firm, I would say that's been an ongoing expense. It's likely not a one-time expense. We would add it to the line item, the 11.597 there, that 24,000 would be added to that, and we'd be below the operating revenue. We'd be fine because I have $47,000 to play with, for lack of a better term. It's not a one-time expense. The one-time expense is the $379,000, and that is eating away at our fund balance. So the-
47,000 is the figure we're working with.
Yeah.
Under what our revenues
Yeah.
are.
And we'll get back to this eventually, because I do anticipate some healthy discussion about putting stuff back, and does that make sense, and can we do that? And is that a one-time expense that comes out of fund balance, or is that something that's an ongoing expense? And I really wanted to make sure we early on talked about that, because I think we've glossed over that. And that's something as a senior leadership team where you look at very closely.
Counselor, you have a question?
Well, you said eating away at the fund balance, the one-time expenditure. How can that eat away at the fund balance if you haven't spent it? The 379.
Because we're projecting that in next year's budget.
Okay.
We are projecting $379,000 of expenses next year in this proposed budget that would come out of what I think Counselor Henderson referred to as contingency. It's not
Yes.
really contingency, it's out of fund balance. It's out of our savings account.
Okay. All right.
And we've got more information that we'll get to that will help kind of reinforce that.
Vice Chair Mayer?
Yeah, so Kathy, can you and Joe?
Sure.
So in this quick synopsis that you did on this memo, you're listing 11,600, or not 11,000, 11 million, pardon me, $644,000 in operating revenue. For the sake of folks that are here and listening to this work session, can you help navigate where this number aligns within the budget detail?
Absolutely, if we could get through here a little bit.
Okay,
That's the
and then you'll-
first thing
okay.
we're
Yep.
going to is the
Okay,
resources.
okay.
That's for exactly
Yeah,
that reason.
that would be
So
helpful.
there would be an understanding of where we're coming from. So
Okay. Any other questions at this point? All right, keep going.
on the next page, then, it does show the one-time revenue and expenditures that are included in the proposed budget. There is that list there, which totals down to the $379,663. There is an asterisk showing at the very end what the asset plan projects are within the park. So funding $64,600 worth of asset plan projects there, and the list of those.
And those, for the folks that have been here a while, that's Craig Sheldon's asset management plan that you saw a few years ago. Those are the projects that he identified and the city identified to do next fiscal year, and we're going to do those, or we're proposing to do those. But they're all one-time expenses.
I have a couple of questions on this. The implementation of Navigator software,
Yes.
is that the training of the staff to use the software? If we already own the software.
No, I believe it is the actual purchase of that Navigator overlay to it. We had the Navision software. We have not purchased and fulfilled the contract to add that Navigator overlay to it. So it will probably include some of the contract costs for that, along with training, et cetera, too.
And then, what is VFD?
Oh, VFD, the,
And what are those, Craig, for? Okay.
And the third question is the chairs that, replacing the chairs at police department, civic building, what do we do with the old chairs?
Well, a number of those chairs really should not be used anymore. I discovered this year that many of the chairs in both buildings are the original chairs. So this building is 10 plus years old. So there are employees sitting in chairs that are 10 years old. And from a health and ergonomic standpoint, chairs are not meant to last for 10 years. So I've paid for some of those chairs in this year's budget, but I couldn't fund all of them. So we're putting money in next year's budget basically to continue to replace everyone's chairs. I think we try to use them if they have some life in them, but a lot of them are not in really good shape, to be honest with you. So that's what those are. And again, that's the one, you don't replace chairs every year. And what we're going to get to is to have a plan to replace them on an ongoing basis.
I was gonna
rather
say, we're
than
gonna have a
let-
rotation
Yeah,
going on there?
yeah. Yes, exactly.
Good.
So, but honestly, I didn't know that there
I
were
can appreciate
chairs in
that.
this building that were 10 plus years old until about 6 months ago.
So are we going in the full discussion right now of the one-time expenditures, or are we just?
Did you have a question in
the,
particular? I mean, again, depending on the question, we may wait till we get to that department, but why don't you try it?
The senior planner, comprehensive plan update, I'm assuming. Last year we did we had a planner in the one-time expenditures. Is this the same planner that we're just carrying over?
No, we've eliminated that position, which was an associate level planner position, so it was a different level, different salary. That project was Sherwood West. A lot of the money for that came from Metro in a grant, so that's done. We want to do the comp plan update. We need to do the comp plan update. So that's a senior planner level position. It's not an ongoing expense because it's a limited duration. We're going to hire someone to help us get that project done, and then that position goes away.
Is this a PERS employee?
No,
Okay, so this is contract for like specified amount of time.
I believe it would not be a PERS.
I
Or is it?
believe
Is it?
It is it's temporary.
It's a
but
temporary
Yeah.
PERS?
They would be.
If it's over 600 hours a year, then
Yeah.
it's a PERS.
Yeah.
There's a PERS requirement.
So do we already have that planner on staff? We're just funding the
No.
planner?
Nope. It would be a new person, assuming it survives the budget process. But it's coming out of this one-time list. It's coming out of the fund balance. It's not coming out of that operating revenue because the intent is not to have that senior planner forever. We're going to bring someone in, do the project, get rid of the position.
And if it costs less, then we'll just have more savings. Same with the recreational feasibility study.
Correct.
You're just doing an upward level and you're hoping to get it for less.
Correct.
Okay.
And we'll get to that, both of those, probably when we get to community development and the recreation stuff. So.
I had a question on the Navigator software. I believe in one of the budget meetings that we had in the past, we talked about the enterprise systems that Sherwood has that was basically geared for manufacturing.
Correct.
Is this the proposed replacement?
Yes, and it's to wrap it up. And Kurt, quite honestly, it got put on hold when Julie Blums resigned, and we had to go out and find an interim finance director and put a budget together, and we're also recruiting for a finance director. That project kind of got put on hold. Once the budget's done, we're going to elevate that because I want to get that done. So, and that would wrap up this project.
So on that same note, then, that amount of money that was a goal for wrapping up 15-16, that portion, or though that portion of funds has rolled over. Okay.
Yep. All right.
Move on.
So we're going to talk about that chart. We're going to get back to 20%. Yes.
Okay. So as you can see this chart on the next page, it does show a projected slow decline in ending fund balance. But staff is committed to providing a balanced budget to the committee each year and maintaining the 20% goal of ending fund balance. However, with the impending increase in the PERS rate in 2017-18, which has been factored into this projection, course corrections may be necessary in the future to ensure that it does get back to 20% and stay that way. So the chart below maintains a conservative growth rate on resources, coupled with the average rates of increase for operating expenditures and the impending approximate 4% increase for the retirement rate. That is 4 percentage points that it will be going up. It's, based on what it is, and we've got further information on that for you later, closer to it. So as you can see from this chart, things are going along swimmingly until about between 2017, 18, and 18, 19. And that is where we start to see, there's going to be a need for some real close scrutiny on that revenues and the resources over the appropriations.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
So when you're talking about the PERS commitment, you're just talking about the minimum rate that we have to pay each year that's given to us that goes into our budget. We're not talking about that 2 million plus liability that we have.
Right. The rate that we are assessed through PERS that we are required to pay every year.
Right, and that's just the minimum that we're required to pay.
Yes.
And so does this budget at all deal with that liability that we have, the 2 million plus?
No.
No. Then it go,
So I just want to make sure,
Yes.
because this is an important chart.
Yes.
Because,
Yeah.
you know, looking out over 5 years, I'm concerned because we're getting closer to that 20%.
Yeah.
You know, back in
Under that
14,
20%.
15, we were at 29%.
Yeah.
And we started
We're over it.
to
The red line's
spend
going
that
up.
fund balance, because that fund balance was almost 10% higher than what your goal was. And we had projects that had been deferred, so we've been slowly spending money on projects, one-time projects, and now we're down to 21% or so. And again, in terms of adding staff, in terms of why did you not fund the code officer? Because I know some of you are not happy about that. This is part of the reason.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we dealt with the 20% earlier. It's 10% is the minimum and the 20% is the desired.
We've
20% is a goal, right?
Right.
Yeah, but the council's going to modify. I mean, you guys have been 20%.
No, I know. I'm just saying, our goal is to have 10%.
Yes.
Very minimum.
Yes.
Because we like 20%, but 10% is the very
But
minimum.
we look at that 20% as kind of a hard rule.
I understand. We discussed that.
And modifying that financial policy a few
Right, I
meetings
remember we
ago.
dealt with that not too long ago. so.
And just as a point of comparison, I was looking at the school district's budget. They have a 10% goal, which is interesting. And a $72 million budget versus a $22 million budget for the cities.
Well, we're sitting a lot better than some cities now that we're facing PERS and we have to deal with that. So,
I have a question on this particular graph. It looks like after the FY 18-19 for those 3 years going on from there, it looks like a downward trend. Are we expecting that downward trend to continue, or have you not done the numbers to look further than?
We haven't
21?
looked further out, but there's some positive news in 22, 23. So when the URA goes away, we will get about a $500,000 to $600,000 bump in our general fund. That's a nice bump, but that's still more than 5 years out. So, you know, looking beyond the 2021 chart it will get a little healthier probably next year.
Mhm.
When you see this chart, you'll see that bump come back up.
Okay.
Because
Do the projection, sorry to ask
Oh, go ahead.
again, but in the 5 future years in this chart, does that include the long-term projects forecasts that we're doing the 16-17 on? As I saw that later in the budget, that's assuming that all those projects that are want-to-dos in the next 5 years are done.
From the asset management plan?
Yeah.
Yes.
Couple.
Yes. No, I can't say those have been factored in quite as fully as that. There's averages built into there, but as far as looking out and saying exactly this amount, this amount, this amount, this year,
Okay, so this
And-
forecast is using the previous year's averages for doing projects for asset management.
And what we can do, that's a great question. We can quickly, between now and next week, take a look and see, are there any really significant ones
Yes.
that are on the horizon that we have not factored into this forecast?
This is basically just on general fund. So many of those projects that would be in the asset management plan may be coming out of other funds.
That's correct.
So this is really a focus on the general fund.
Okay. Councilor Henderson.
Thank you. Does your forecast in the 18, 19, 19, 20, and 2021 include the beginning of the retirement of the urban renewal district when we have to go into revenue sharing as the district starts to expire?
Tom, do you know the answer to that?
That was part of the, I don't know what to call it, compromise, when you were allowed to modify your maximum indebtedness so that you would start repaying back or start cost sharing with the adjoining districts, including the city. And I'm just wondering if that was factored in.
Yeah, it was. Every year we go through this, we'll have to refine those numbers a little more as far as the revenue But essentially, once you get over the 10% of the original maximum indebtedness, you can go from 10% up to 12.5%, but you need to share that additional increment over that 10% of the original maximum indebtedness at a 75% to the other taxing districts and 25% to the Urban Renewal Agency. So as we've projected that forward over the next few years, we've taken that into account.
Okay.
It doesn't end up being a whole lot just because we're only getting 25% of the additional revenue.
Right.
But certainly there is more shared revenue that will be coming to the city of Sherwood because of that change in this, because we changed the plan back in 2012.
Thanks.
And again, I do reiterate that this is a conservative approach on the revenue, so it's, don't want to put it overly optimistic.
The power of history, right?
Any further questions on this? Then wrapping up this memo here, the requested items that were not included in the proposed budget, as we say, these are for items that were cut over $5,000. And we just wanted to bring them to your attention though, as far as what requests had been made that are no longer sitting in the budget.
Any quick questions on any of those?
A quick question I have for items not included that are 5,000 or under, were there a significant number of those or just enough to not include here?
No, there were not a significant number of them. I think the directors were very, very conservative in their budgeting, and not there were not a lot of big cut or numerous cuts that were made throughout.
It was basically these large ones.
Okay.
Out of those items you listed, you cut, the code compliance was the only reoccurring one out of those items.
No,
No, these are all well,
these are all recurring.
That's what I'm trying to
The
figure out which ones
CFM
are
is
and are not.
one-time expense, as your example.
Yes.
Recurring?
Yes. Yes. Some are one-time, some could be. That is the only reoccurring personnel one.
Okay.
correct.
And what about items that are under 5,000? Were those cut, just not presented here, or are they still on the budget?
But not presented.
Yeah.
But there were not many of them.
There weren't many of those. And when we get to the departmental budgets and you see the specific line items and you can say, okay, Brad in IT is requested $10,000 here and he had 20,000 last year. Well, why the cut?
Mm-hmm.
And we're prepared to answer those kind of questions.
And I'm assuming we'll be discussing these items later
Yep.
on.
Sure.
Okay.
I anticipate that, so. But we wanted to provide a summary at the beginning,
Okay.
because it's a question that has been asked, so.
I have a question on.
Sure. Sure.
On the Robin Hood Festival, I remember sitting in the audience last year, and there was a discussion about $10,000. And I heard I believe it was the city council say they were gonna have some, or maybe the city staff were gonna have a discussion with the Robin Hood committee. Was that discussion ever held?
Yeah, we had some conversations. I've tried to cut this. This is now the third year out of 4 that I've been city manager that I've tried to cut this. And I have a potential solution for the Robin Hood Festival. If they want to request up to $10,000, they can actually request more, is that there is a current grant application process, the Metro Community Enhancement Grant. There's $80,000 to $81,000 projected that we would have from Metro next year. That's the route that I would encourage them, is to apply for that resource, which is not coming out of property taxes.
Is that the same that we had that money last year, where we had some 5 or 6, maybe more organizations, including the city? I think it was the
Correct.
community garden.
Yep. So that process is open now. Applications are due June 3rd. So that, to me, is the route that the Robin Hood Festival should take. We need to chat with them about that, but,
Yeah.
Yeah, I can say no,
so,
based on a conversation with Phil McQuiggan.
so.
I have a
Friend me on Facebook, so we might have a clue.
I have a comment.
Sure.
What I remember is what we wanted to do was help them or encourage them or partner with them to basically wean their reliability on the city. Because early on, we used to do grants of, Kristen Schweitzer remembers it well. We used to do grants of 25 to 30,000, and we would spend 2.5 hours on 1/2 of 1% of the budget because it was really hard to decide who was
Right.
worthy and who wasn't.
Right.
So what I had remembered was we were going to try to encourage them to write grants and maybe go from 10,000 to 5,000 to 2,500 and eventually be able to help them replace that, from what I heard from Phil was they need that money to make the event happen. And, but to
Agreed.
give them some
Right.
other tools and suggestions.
Well, I think giving them other tools and suggestions is a great idea, but my personal feeling, and we can talk about it at some other point, to go from 10,000 expectation to 0 is, to me, not in the best interest of that relationship. Being that the Robin Hood Festival is going on, it's, 60 years plus. So if we are going to consider a cut like that, I would much rather have it step down in anticipation of more discussions rather than just cut them off to cold turkey. So,
We'll get to that.
okay.
And this is the exact conversation we've had for 3 years, so.
Okay.
May I ask
Yes.
where the flagpole replacement was, Craig?
Police station.
Police station, okay, thanks.
So if you've never noticed, and I don't understand why, the flagpole at the police station, which is in the front, is very short. So when we have flags at half staff, the flag is almost hitting the ground, which is a no-no.
Yeah.
So I asked Craig basically, and the chief has asked me, could we replace that flagpole? Thinking that it would be much less expensive than what is listed here. So flagpoles are not cheap, that I've discovered. So so we're going to, again, in my proposed budget, that's not a priority. It's been that way for many years, and it's a luxury. So I cut it.
Is that something that could qualify for the community enhancement grant?
I'd have to look at the criteria, potentially. So,
Would the city be open to a community group doing it?
of course. Okay.
All right, I think we're ready
All
to
right.
go line by line.
Thank you. These are all great questions. So I want to talk, or we're going to talk revenue. Because we don't usually talk about revenue very much before we get to expenditures and details. So I would like you to go to, in the line item detail section, page 1 and 2. And I encourage, if there's any line items on here, they're like, what is that? To ask. There's a couple line items that we want to highlight, though, that I think that are important as we continue to kind of tell this story. The first line item is line item 4010, current property taxes. So when you look on the left-hand side, there are numbers that correspond. So 4010 is that first number up in the upper left corner. Does everyone?
That's right.
No.
Oh,
I'm
no,
sorry.
if you go to the next page.
You're on
Yeah,
this one.
yeah, yeah. There you go. Just a couple more pages.
It's all right.
Hang on a second. Oh, here we go.
There we go.
Thanks, Andy. I knew I due for a reason.
So is everyone on that page? Okay, because we're going to stay here for a little bit of time here. So, when you look across, and you'll see this throughout all the details, you have 3 years of actuals. So when it says fiscal year 12-13 actual, 13-14 actual, 14-15 actual, those are actual numbers in terms of past years. 15-16 adopted, that column is what the city council adopted last year for this current year's budget. 15-16 projected is what we, 10 plus months into the year, are projecting what we truly will, in this case, receive in these respective revenue lines. So that's a truer number because we're 10 months into the year. And then the last column is what we are proposing for next year. Great question. Excellent. So if you look at what we are projecting for next fiscal year is exactly as Councilor Robbins said, we are projecting basically 5.17 in tax revenue, as opposed to what you see in the adopted budget, 5.2, and we are receiving almost 5.3 in this projected year. So a couple of things are going on. The URA 1-year spike actually saved us this year a little bit. That's helping us. And that number from last year, the 5.2, was probably a little higher estimate that was made a year ago. And these are always made by the finance director, but they're reviewed by me. And it was a little high. If we hadn't had that URA bump, we probably would be about 5 million, 4.8 to 4.9.
Wow.
So we kind of are adjusting back to where we believe is a more conservative number. I would hope that we would bring in more, but that's probably not, that would be overestimating again, and we don't want to do that. So that's an important number. So, usually if you look at the actual numbers, it goes 4.2 to 4.4 to 4.6. There's a 200 to 300,000 bump every year as each year goes through. This year, we're pretty much flat. So that's important to know in terms of, the amount of money. If this was a business, and we are a business, we're different, but we are a business, or if this was your household, how much money, this is where we start, how much revenue overall are we going to be able to work with in next year's budget? So that first line item is not a good number in terms of previous years, but I think it's a very realistic number. Yes, yes. Correct. But that's only a 1-year spike. Now we're going to go back to where we are. Another line there, jump down to 4053, franchise cable TV. So if you look across the trends, 278, 277, 285, we thought we would receive 294. Lo and behold, we're only going to receive 234. Like, what's going on there? And you see we're only proposing a smaller amount. Well, that's because people are dumping cable. We're not doing Comcast anymore. We're not doing Frontier anymore.
Watching online.
They're doing other things,
Right.
which means those companies are generating less revenue in our jurisdiction, which means we're going to get less money. So that's why that's gone down. And that's probably a likely continuing, we're going to see that trend. We're going to see less franchise fees for the cable franchises as
So-
we
If
look
that's
forward.
the case, then why is the 16-17 higher than the 15-16 projected?
Growth in housing, new houses, and other kind of things. So, go ahead.
There's an issue, a dispute regarding franchise fees with one of the entities, and I don't remember which one it is. Is that factored in here, or is that just at the,
That would be
normal.
CWS down there, which is Clean Water Services. That is continuing. That's pretty flat, actually. That takes our side of the
okay,
dispute into the equation.
okay.
We didn't make an adjustment. So again, these are summarized. So if you look at the total taxes, which is only part of the story, in the adopted year budget, the current budget, we're at 7.1 million. We're going to actually bring in 7.2, so we're beating our projection or our budget. But overall, for next year, we're down. We're at 7.17. Well, actually, it's a slight increase, so it's a very slight increase in terms of taxes. So it's essentially flat in that category. Another line item, if you jump down into the total intergovernmental charges for services, 4361. County support to library. You'll see a nice healthy spike. We budgeted 775 and we're going to receive 824, and we're projecting 846. That's the county, new county levy. So we're getting more money because the voters said not only renew the county levy, but it's an increase in the county levy. So one of the questions you'll see when we get to the library section is we're adding a half-time position. Well, why are you adding? Well, because we're getting more revenue from the county library system, and voters said they want more for libraries, and that's what it's for.
Yeah.
Would not necessarily be right to take that extra revenue from the county library and spend it on somewhere else in the general, an assistant for me or something, another assistant for example.
Yeah.
So I wanted you to be aware that's where the increase is in terms of the county library.
Very good.
4395, it's interesting, you'll see we adopted, this is miscellaneous intergovernmental. You gotta love that. 52,000 is what we projected, or in the adopted, we actually brought in 180,000, and we're budgeting nothing for next year. That's Sherwood West. That's the grant dollars that came in from Metro for the Sherwood West project. So we don't anticipate any of those in this year's budget. So we're not budgeting for any intergovernmental. And that, as you can see, kind of, if you look at history, bounces around a lot.
I have a comment.
Yes, please, go ahead.
If you go back up to line item 4058, electricity. Notice the trend?
That's PGE.
So, yeah, 14, 15, 305,000. Look at the next year.
Yeah.
Anybody curious why that is?
A lot more commercial.
No, that's because the PGE franchise fee went from 3.5%
Five.
to 5
Huh?
because,
Of what, our code, municipal code.
no, because that was allowed to go to 5 because somebody failed to take action. And
Yeah.
it did not have to do with staff. So we're all paying more in franchise fees because that wasn't addressed.
But it's
but the
consistent
increase-
with all the other utilities.
Right,
Yeah.
but that's what I mean, it's
Yeah, it's
consistent
consistent with
our-
everyone else.
Yeah,
Right,
with
but we had the
Yeah.
opportunity to keep it at 3.5 and now we're all paying more.
Right, but then we would have had other franchises come to us and say, well, you gave PGE 3.5, we want that too.
Correct.
Well, each one of them is negotiated individually though.
Right. We would
But
have had a
it's
problem on our
it's a
hands.
large chunk of change.
Yeah,
It
it
is
is.
a large.
Yeah,
It went
it's a
down a
lot.
little bit from what you projected, but
Mhm.
still a significant source of revenue.
It jumped by half.
I meant from proposed to projected.
Oh, uh-huh.
What's city utilities?
Those are franchises paid for by the city utilities. We charge our utilities a franchise fee. So, the water utility, what others? Craig, stormwater.
Water, stormwater, sanitary, street.
So we treat our own utilities like we do private utilities. And that's pretty consistent. Cities do that. That's not something unique to Sherwood.
Does it include the sanitary, or is that just the
Sanitary is its own line, right?
next one down?
That is for clean water services. That's separate.
So is there a double charge on the sanitary then?
It's charged separately. Yes.
One for the city and one for the
Yeah.
county?
But only city lines that meet
Yes.
up with clean water services lines, right?
I'm looking at Craig back there. Do you have anything to offer?
We get charged for the 600,000 sanitary, city COS, 5% of that, and then the clean water services, whatever that is, 2.9 or whatever.
It's not a double charge though, Susan. It's a separate charge that we charge separately and we track it separately.
So the charge is split, the city charges it, but some of it goes to clean water, and that's why we're disputing it. Is that right?
We're not disputing it.
They're disputing.
They're disputing it. Because we're one of the, we are one of the few cities, actually the only city in Washington County that does it, and other cities are going to start doing it. So,
They want it all, and we want to share.
no, we've charged it for 4 or 5 years, and they're starting to question it. So, Well, all that money, basically, all of these line items go into the big general fund revenue source. So we'll get to that total line down there. You know, the total of 11.7, everyone thinks property taxes. Well, of the 11.7 in the proposed budget, only 5.1 is property taxes. So I think what we're trying to stress is that the city has a variety of revenue sources. Some are going up, some are declining. It's not just property taxes. And I think there's a misperception that property taxes pay for everything in the general fund. And it's an important component. It's nearly half, but it's not the only piece of the puzzle. So another line, and we'll get into this when we look at community development, the one that's probably one of the more harder ones to project is 4650 and 4651. If you look at those lines, they kind of bounce around year to year. So if you look at project plan review, we adopted a budget of almost $143,000 in revenue. We are projecting only to collect $9,000.
Wow.
Project inspections, $178,000 in projected revenue. We only are collecting $10,000. So remember that when Julia comes up, because that's an important piece of the puzzle. And you see that kind of jumps around year to year. So if you look at the bottom line on that, the total infrastructure development fees, it goes 150, 270, 157, 335, 37.9, 219. I mean, that's really development. And she's trying to predict when things are going to come in. And sometimes they don't come in that 12-month period. So a number of things that we thought were going to come in this past 12 months didn't come in, and some of those will come in next year.
Okay.
But that goes up and down.
Can you give an example of?
Julia, you want to give an example? Without getting too much into it?
Yeah, sometimes it's just, so this is engineering, so it's, maybe things are at the planning stage, and we think they're gonna get through the process quicker than they do, and then they don't, or we think they're gonna go through the process, they're really gung-ho, and then nothing happens. Or, on the other side, things that you think are gonna take a while actually come in the previous fiscal year. So when we're putting the budget together, we're kind of looking at what might come in when. So I'm trying, I mean, I don't know that I can do this example off the top of my head. Well, one, the Springs Assisted Living Facility. We budgeted, we thought that was going to be in and through the process, and it's not. So that's an example of something that last year they were really serious and thought it would come in. So, thank you.
The lines, the transfer lines, so transfer in from water fund, transfer in from sanitary fund, you'll see back in those three actual columns there was nothing, and then this year there's something. So do you want to explain what that is and the change?
Yes, well, this is dealing with the fleet department that was just instituted in the 15-16 year. So these are the transfers coming in from the operations funds of water, sewer, sanitary, and street as a contribution back into the general fund to help support the fleet fund.
So I have a question for you. Since the transfer into the water fund,
Transferring from water.
From water.
Yes, it's a
from water, into the general fund, normally that can't happen. I mean, unless the water fund should stay within the water fund. So I'm assuming that this transfer is related to, in capital that is related directly to water.
Exactly. It would be for the fleet, all the vehicles, all the equipment, et cetera, are taken care of within the fleet department, but they're attributable out to these various operations.
Right, by
funds.
percentage,
So
like-
by percentage, et
Okay.
cetera, by direct usage, possibly,
Right.
whatever it may be.
Okay,
And then it's calculated, and their fair share then is brought back
Right. I
into
just
the
wanted to-
general fund to support that.
okay, I just want to clarify
Yeah.
that.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Correct.
Yep.
Okay.
Well,
Allocated
speaking
in
of personnel,
some
where does the 4% get tacked on?
What 4%?
From the water fund, we are attributing, isn't it 4%? Or is
Not
it
anymore.
7%? For their share of personnel services.
We're going to get there.
Okay.
We're not there yet.
All right.
And then the other one that I think is very important, 5,400 interfund loan payment. You see 146, 147, 148. We have 180 in this year's budget, and then nothing. What is that?
No
That's
loans
Sherwood
were made?
Broadband
Telecom.
Telecom paying back the general fund for a loan that was made many years ago. So the good news is that loan has been paid for, and Sherwood Broadband and the Telecom Fund now has more resources available. And when we get to that fund, we'll look at it. But that's $180,000 that's in this year's budget. That's not going to be in next year's budget. That, quite honestly, we were so excited that the loan got paid off, we kind of not forgot, but we didn't really think about, oh, that's a hit to the general fund.
Yeah.
That's another decline in terms of our revenues.
Because the telecom is a restricted fund, right?
It has nothing to do, they're paying back a loan. It's like
Right,
one
I know,
business
but I mean, you
paying another
can't in
one.
the future use money.
That's
paying for
correct.
that. That's what I mean. Okay.
So again, if you look at the bottom line, the total revenue transfers in and other sources, what we are projecting in next year's budget is 11.7, which is smaller, both compared to what we're bringing in the current year and what we budgeted. So we have less revenue next year than we have currently this year. That's an important starting point. And that's not usually the case, because if you look across the years, 9.6 to 10.4, then it declined actually in 14, 15, then it jumped back up. So this is a year where our revenues are actually smaller to start out with. We will get into the details on the expenditures probably by department. And the other one, if you go to page 4, and you go all the way to the bottom line, there's two lines there, the total expenditure line and the income or loss. So you probably have seen that there's a 1% decline or reduction in the general fund. That is basically the 12.073, which is the proposed general fund expenditure compared to the 12.2. So we are proposing in the general fund to spend 1% less than what is in the current adopted budget. We're only projecting to spend 11.7 though, of that 12.2. So that's another important thing to remember. The line below it, if you look at FY 15-16, we were going to spend 12.2, including eating away $418,000 of the fund balance. The reality is we're going to be $37,000 to the good, so we're ending the year better off than we thought we would be. This budget proposal is there's that 339 again. That's what we are proposing to spend in the fund balance. And you'll see back in 12-13 and 13-14, we were building that fund balance up. And then we started to spend some of that fund balance over the previous few years. And we're continuing to do that, but it's a smaller amount as we get closer to that 20% target.
So what were the things that you were gonna spend and then didn't?
We will get through those department by department. That kind of collapses them all together. But that could be as simple as salary savings. You know, we budgeted someone to be in a position 12 months out of the year, and then that person left, and there was a gap, and we didn't have someone. So a lot of that could be salary savings. You'll see more savings in certain departments. So there is no one reason, I guess, is what I'm saying, Susan. Any questions before we get into kind of the specific departments?
Yes. Based on the overview, perhaps I'm missing something, and if I am, my apologies. But on page 1, it says the change in the general fund balance is broken down as follows. And the operating revenue is listed at $11,644,000, but that doesn't align with this number.
Why is that number
You looking at a memo?
It's off by the 90,000. There was a $90,000 grant. It was basically a one-time operating revenue, so I backed that out of there. That $90,000 grant, the income and the expenditure net out in the last one-time expenses net.
Okay.
So that's what the 90,000. That's
So
the
that
difference
90,000 is
there.
one-time money
Yes, it was one-time
that
money.
you didn't
Mhm.
include in the operating revenue figures, because it's one-time money.
Okay. Got it.
Before we move on, I have a question for Julia.
Sure.
You discussed the process of the 2-year or the,
Thank you, excuse me.
you plan something for this year, but it doesn't happen to next year. Would that help if the budget committee adopted and the city council adopted a 2-year budgeting cycle?
It could, we do have to
saying that
talk
she
about
took
that. It would,
this
be more even. I mean, there are fluctuations.
So just didn't include
Problem is that we're budgeting 2 years out instead of, start the budget process in January, so we're doing it in about 18 months. I think it would allow for some of those things like engineering things to be out a little bit more. The planning stuff might be a little bit more up in the air because, when we're preparing the planning revenue projections, it's really kind of based on what we're hearing, what we're seeing, pre-application, things like that. And so, there might be a lot more unknowns in certain aspects of the budget, but I think the two-year budget would have it be more even for less fluctuations from year to year when things might come in a month after the fiscal year.
Thank you.
And we've had some conversations, again, with the change in the finance director and other things. We've kind of put the possible implementation of a 2-year budget kind of on the back burner, but we are still interested in exploring that. A number of cities do that currently, and there seems to be more interest among cities to do a 2-year budget rather than a 1-year. This process would be every 2 years rather than every year. Do you want to check on time in terms of a break? I don't want to.
How do people feel? Show of hands, anybody interested in taking a 5-minute break now before we move on to the next hour and a half? Sure. I hear someone going for a break. Let's adjourn until 7:30. Before we resume, I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded. And to help Jean out with taking the minutes, in addition to the recording, please speak toward the microphones, and please make sure your microphone is off in the green light position when you're making your comments. Otherwise, it's very hard for her to catch all those comments. So make sure your microphone is on. All right, Joe. I think we almost have everyone back here. I want to make sure that nobody gets missed before we move on and go into the line-by-line items. What's the first page you want people to point to?
So we're going to go to page 7, which is the city recorder's departmental budget. But before we do that, Chair, we're at 7:30.
Mm-hmm.
We are scheduled to go till 9.
Correct.
I want to ensure that we have enough time to do our public hearing on state shared revenues, which we're required to do, which will probably be fairly short, but also give enough time for public comment.
Okay.
Because we always try to take public comment at each budget committee meeting.
Right.
Have you received any forms for public comment at this point?
We have 2.
You have 2.
We have 2 so far.
So I will probably do a check-in about 8:15-ish. We should check in to see where we are, because what we can do is go to the public hearing, go to the public comment, and then if there's some time left, let's say there's 20 minutes until 9, we can come back to the budget. But I want to make sure we have ample time for the public to say what they want to say here tonight. So.
All right. So I think we'll move on the line by lines until 8:15. And then, like you said, take care of the public hearing and public comment sections. And then, if time allows, we can get back into some line by lines before 9 o'clock.
Correct.
Any objections?
No.
Okay.
And if there's anyone in the audience that wants to provide either testimony at the public hearing or public comment, please fill the form out so we can get those all up here. So we have a chance, at 8:15, we'll have a sense of how many people want to speak tonight. And this won't be the last time. Next week, there'll be, at each budget committee meeting, we always allow public comment, so. Sure.
Microphone.
Susan?
Susan, could you turn the microphone on, please?
Thanks.
Thank you.
Page 2 of our revenues,
Yes.
it's right at the hole punch, the middle hole punch, 49 something, rent of buildings and facilities. We had projected or adopted the budget for 15 to 16 at 216,000, and our projected is now at 157. What is that? Is that the art center?
Correct.
Okay.
That's
So-
largely the art center.
Okay, so is that because it hasn't been rented?
Correct.
Okay, so our last budget, we projected that we would be getting about 50,000.
Yeah,
And-
when we get to
here.
Kristen's section specifically on the art center,
Okay.
you can see what we budgeted for that specifically and what we did not receive. So,
Okay.
but that's largely the art center,
Okay.
lease space.
And so what portion of that 157 revenue will know that is the art center?
Yeah, hold that
That's
till
what
we get
she's
to
gonna
that,
talk.
yep.
Okay. And then each department head will say what that 157 is from? I mean, what are those?
Well, the only, yeah, and then,
YMCA?
I believe so, correct?
Okay.
And then there's the lease for Sesame Donuts that's in here.
Okay,
That's a
Okay.
small amount of money, but.
okay,
But the difference between what we budgeted and what we are projecting to receive is largely the fact that the Arts Center space has not been leased yet.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so let's go to page 7. So we're going to focus on the administration division. And within that division, there are upwards of 6 to 8 departments. And the first department is the city recorder's department, which is on page 7. So when we go through these, I would encourage any questions on any line items. If you're like, what is that line item for? Now Sylvia's not here. I didn't anticipate a lot of questions on her budget. If there's something that we can't answer, we'll get back to you next week, obviously. But the other thing I think that maybe you have not seen or noticed is each department, I hate to describe it this way, but there are, from a money standpoint, winners and losers. So that last item, income loss, that's basically looking at, the city recorder does not generate a lot of revenue as a department specifically. So she's not a profit center. Her department is not a profit center. And you'll see this in admin. City manager is not a profit center. I don't generate any revenue. I spend money in my department, but I don't generate it. And that's what that bottom figure is. There are certain departments that you'll see a very significant plus side, like court. When you get to court, please pay attention to that bottom line because it's pretty significant. So
How many FTEs do we have in the city recorder portion of the budget? 1.5.
So this is essentially, I'm going to say this kind of the bottom line for each department. If you look at the current year adopted versus the projected, this is essentially a very flat budget. I think it's a slight decrease of about $500. So any questions in particular about the city recorder's budget?
One of the goals that we discussed last year's budget was separating the budgets for council and city recorder.
Yes.
Did that happen?
Yes, because if you look over on page 8,
Page.
Oh.
is the city council budget.
There you
And
go.
that's a great segue, actually, because if you look at the expenditure line, the bottom line expenditure line, you see total expenditures of 180, 257, 215, and now it's down below 200. Well, that's because we've essentially taken the city council portion out and separated it. It's much easier to track. I think it's more appropriate. Because people always want to know, well, what are we spending on for those elected officials in terms of the city council?
How much are they costing?
How much are they costing us, so to
Yeah, we
speak?
don't generate revenue either.
Joe? On line 6130, the legal, is that the difference between having the law firm?
Yes, that's a
Okay.
great question. You'll see, because we have 3 years of history, departments that were charged previously when we had a outside contract attorney, those charges, though we don't charge ourselves now. So we're not budgeting, for the most part, departments don't have a legal line item. We just get to use Josh as much as we want, right? There are some departments that still have some money for outside counsel, though. It's a great question. So that's one of the things you'll see that's different.
So if we add up the actuals from different departments for any given year, we would see approximately what was projected.
Yes, and we've done that analysis for when council made the decision to go in-house versus outside. One of the questions you guys asked is, well, how much have we been spending on attorneys for the last 4 or 5 years? And our former attorneys did a very good job of billing us. So we had all that information in terms of where we spent that money by department and things like that.
What attorney doesn't do a very
Exactly.
good job of billing?
Yeah. So.
So one question is, well, if it's okay to move from the city reporter page now to the council page? Yes, may I do that?
Sure. I don't want to rush through if anyone has a.
Reporter, yeah.
Some of these I think are going to be fairly short,
Mm-hmm.
and some are going to be more extensive. So.
Chair, do you mind if I
Yeah,
move
but
on?
we can have
Okay.
questions on either one while the pages are open.
Yes.
So on the city council budget, something that's been discussed a little bit and touched on is considering a stipend for city council. And I would like for the budget committee to talk about that and to perhaps make a recommendation to council that that be considered.
So currently, the charter does not allow.
Oh, we can't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, bummer.
So I think the council is actually one of the items that's been discussed and probably will be discussed is potential to ask voters to allow a stipend for their city councilors. That would have to go to the voters.
Good.
You could put money there, but
You
I
can't
couldn't.
spend it that
I
way.
couldn't give it to the councilors in a sense.
We would love to. Oh.
That's
So-
unfortunate.
So if you look at the city council budget, and we only have basically 10 months, it's a flat budget. And again, in a $26 million budget, the council budget's $22,000. No, I wouldn't say cheap, but proportionally, it's a very small amount of money that we spend for what I have. I work with the counselors on a daily basis. The amount of hours that you guys put into this volunteer job is amazing, and most of that 22,000 is in travel and training, and I would emphasize that's training, and sometimes that training requires travel. So to go to the League of Oregon Cities, you got to go to Bend or Salem or Eugene, unless it's here, or other types of things. It's a pretty minimal amount of money, and that's my professional opinion. So, any questions on the council budget?
Why do we pay tax?
Great question.
FICA and workers' comp and for all volunteers.
I know that.
I'd be happy to. The $960 is listed in there for the technology stipend. Is for the mayor's cell phone, and Sally is the tax benefit to her, so this is, it runs through this way. So that is what those taxes are.
Great question. Okay, let's get to where the real money is, the city manager's budget. That would be a joke. So page 9 and 10, certainly more significant dollars than the city recorder and the council budget. So you can see at the top, as I said, my department doesn't generate any revenue. This budget is, again, if you compare the current year to next year is there's a reduction. So we're at 402 for this year. We're only proposing 345. So the things that you saw on my cut list, primarily Robin Hood Festival, that comes out of the city manager's budget. That's $10,000 that is not in next year's budget. CFM, which is the firm that we use in Washington, D.C., that is essentially a lobbying firm, that's $24,000 in the current year's budget. That is not in my proposed budget for next year. And then the last item is a $25,000 contribution to help do a strategic plan for the city, which has been in the budget for the last 2 years that we've not gotten to. And quite honestly, as much as I would like to get that done with other pressing matters, I don't believe it's going to get done in the next 12 months, so I didn't budget for it. So that's really where the change between next year and this year is in those items. The city manager's department is myself. Tom Pessimir is the assistant city manager, which is a portion of his time. Remember, he is funded out of URA. There's a small portion actually funded of my time out of the URA. And then my assistant, or actually it's our assistant, Tina, is the city manager's budget in terms of personnel. And the intern that we've done the last 3 years, we would like to continue that. That's about, I think it's $8,000 or $7,000. That would continue in next year's budget if you were to approve my departmental budget.
Joe, I have a comment, and I really mean this with all due respect. I really do. I just am not exactly sure how to articulate.
Sure, take a shot.
So it really frustrates me to see that the strategic plan has been placed, if you will, on the back burner. Because as I see it, that is a major priority issue for the city of Sherwood. And when I look at 1516 highlights and see, and I know folks love their furry friends, and I love gardening as well, but when I see that those two items were completed and that the strategic plan was put on the back burner, that leaves me with some heartburn. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I understand, and I don't think the community garden, that money for the community garden came out of a different pot of money. It was a competing priority. It really didn't impact my department or my time. What competing with my time was, and Tom's time, was the police staffing study,
Okay.
which we didn't really plan for. The feasibility study for the Y, which is an important project, or for the recreational center that the city currently has, that's a project that needs to get done, and there's money in the budget in a separate department for that. It's really a bandwidth in terms of what we're capable of getting done. So I agree. I'm disappointed that it hasn't gotten done, but I also want to be realistic and not keep saying, oh, we're going to get it done, we're going to get it done.
Right.
And let's put money in the budget and then not spend the money. So, and the strategic plan is, again, for the organization. It's a business plan 3 to 5 years out in terms of the business. It's not the comp plan, which quite honestly I think is much more important for the community.
I would
So
agree.
it's a choice. You can't do everything you want, and that's
Right.
why I cut it. But I do have some shared disappointment that that's not complete. I don't know if that helps at all, but
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things, and people do this in their houses, you do this in your businesses, you can't do everything you want. And you certainly can't fund everything you want. So.
Councilor Harris.
Could you explain in a little more detail strategic plan versus comp plan? Because I think it's confusing, and a lot of people might assume that the strategic plan is the comp plan, or the comp plan is different than the strategic plan. I didn't fully understand
Sure.
the difference, so.
So a strategic plan for the city of Sherwood is optional. We're not required as a public organization to have a strategic plan for our organization. More and more cities and public agencies are doing that. It's good business. It's best practice. We tend to live year to year to year, where a strategic plan is looking a little bit more like 3 to 5 years out. as an organization, as a business.
Yeah.
The comp plan is legally required because of Oregon land use law. I'm not probably going to use the right terms. Julia may correct me, but in our comp plan, which is really our blueprint for this community, is vastly outdated. And that, to me, if you have to pick priorities, that's a priority.
Yes.
Because that is the basis for decision making. It's a basis for making changes in your zoning code. It's really, and that is, the strategic plan doesn't have a lot of community engagement.
What is a strategic plan? Like, is that we're going to have 7 people in planning, or is that we're going to build roads 12?
No, it's not going to be build roads. It's
Right.
like, we're
That's
going
my
to
point,
reinvest in a computer software, let's say Hanson. Hanson is a piece of software that we use that we're not going to do all our software upgrades in 1 year because it's going to stretch the organization and it's unrealistic. But 3 years from now, we're going to plan to upgrade Hanson because we need to. So it's a plan for the organization. It's a business plan. Think of it as a business plan rather than a strategic plan.
Versus a community.
It's looking at chairs.
It's looking things like at
Right.
chairs
Yeah.
and more operational. And it's
I get it, because I got it
Yeah.
explained, but if I didn't understand it, I'm guessing someone out there, TV world, also might be confused about what it is and why there's a difference.
And here to add a little bit more complexity, something that you haven't seen that we haven't talked about. In a perfect world, which we don't live in, before we did our comp plan update, we would do a community visioning. Because as a community, we would engage people in the community and say, what's the vision for Sherwood? Not just a land use. Comp plan's land use.
Right.
A vision for a community is, what do we want to be 15, 20 years from now? And a lot of communities have done that visioning. And in a perfect world, you do that community vision, engage the community, this is what we want to be. Then you would do the comp plan update because that's a piece of that puzzle. And then you do a strategic plan to align the organization with those two, bigger kind of plans. And I think the comp plan, because of the legal basis and the requirements and how out of date it is, and the land use issues and the growth issues in town and the tension between folks about how do we grow, that's the priority.
Yeah.
Mayor Clark?
So I also, since we have citizens watching and listening, wanted to make sure that there was a clarification piece because you brought something up that I think is a little bit confusing. And you want to make sure that when you're talking about the funds that you're clear on where monies come from. And so when you say things like community gardens are nice to have, but I'd rather have a strategic plan. So I just want to make sure that it's very clear that the community gardens and the recycle program were both paid for not by city funds. They were paid for by a grant from Metro. So
Okay.
those were paid in full by a grant from Metro. So they did not come from the budget at all.
But those funds were a part of the general fund.
No,
No.
they were not.
They were not.
They were
They're
from
actually in
an
the general
outside
construction.
grant. And so that's what I want to make sure that you understood.
Thank you for that
They,
clarification.
they were from an outside grant that can only be used
For those
for
purposes.
certain things.
Right.
That qualify under their, alignment of this can be used, this can be used, this can be used. You can't use it for just anything.
Right.
It can only be used for a certain amount of items under their community enhancement grant.
Okay,
And
thank you for that
I
clarification.
could not have used $25,000 out of the Metro CET grant to fund the strategic plan.
No.
And the 25,000 is really to hire a facilitator and a consultant to help us get through the process.
Okay.
Because when you talk to other jurisdictions that have gone through this and try to do it themselves with everything that's on our plate, it's just not going to get done. You need someone that can come in, that's done it before, that's worked with other public organizations and helped you through the process. Some cities take a year and a half to do it. I'm not interested in that. We don't have the luxury of that kind of time. There's just too much work to be done. So I have kicked it out. Hopefully next year we can do it. And again, I have a little bit of shared heartburn because it's something that I think is really important to the organization. But I think the comp plan update is paramount.
Well,
Councilor Kuipers?
Yeah, just a couple things. One is kind of a tangent, but just to clarify, the Metro grant that went for community gardens and some other, I think there were probably 5 or 6 people.
Right.
Is that something that the city is guaranteed from Metro every year, or how do we get that money from Metro?
We have an IGA, an agreement now
That's
with
right.
Metro.
Did that come out of the funds that we received for becoming a recycling or
It's
solid
because we
waste?
host a
That's right.
recycling
Thank you.
transfer station Pride.
And that's why we get that money?
Correct.
Okay, thank
And
you.
Metro has had this program from a number of years. We were not part of it.
Right.
So Forest Grove, for example, has hosted a transfer station for years and has been receiving money from this program for years, and we were not. And Metro wanted to level the playing field. They basically said, look, we need to treat all the communities that host a transfer station fairly and consistently, and now we're getting that money, where in years past we had not.
Okay, I
But
just wanted everyone
like anything with
listening to
Metro,
understand that.
there's
Important.
strings attached in terms of how we can use that money.
That's right, okay. And then the other item was, I was under the impression that the comprehensive plan does include some community engagement.
Oh, it will have community engagement. Don't
Okay.
get me wrong. It's just not, a vision is more than land use.
Yes.
Because it's talking about, well, what kind of schools do we want? And what kind of,
Okay.
the comp plan is really land use focused.
Right, I
Which I think
understand
that's
that.
what people are passionate about in this community, and that's where
They
the debate are.
But also not to take it out of context as well. That's what I'm, wanting to ensure that when we go through the comprehensive plan process and we engage the community, that it's within the context of some of these other things, so. But that's tangent, so. Thank you.
Councilor Harris?
And I just wanted to reiterate, I think that you had said this, but if the committee in general decides that maybe a strategic plan is important, we do have that 47,000, that if they really wanted to do that and it felt like it was a imperative that it get done, we could instigate that from there.
Yes.
Or
you
any of the other
could,
things that
but
we opted
again,
not
I
to.
fall back to
I'm not suggesting
bandwidth
we do.
in terms of, is it realistic on top of everything else that the council has identified?
I'm certainly not suggesting we do, but the reality is anything on that list, you said, if the committee decides, they could say, we want you to do this.
Sure.
Whether that's a good idea or not is a totally different
Sure.
conversation, but.
Right, so we could allocate the funds, but do we have, like you
Right, do
said,
we
Joe,
want
the
to?
bandwidth? Do we have the personnel to
Yep.
even attack that?
And
Yep.
should we be doing it? Yeah.
Yes.
That's a different discussion, but I
Exactly.
just wanted to reiterate that that is something, if people wanted to revisit the Robin Hood Festival or CFM.
Exactly.
Or that.
Any more comments or questions on the city manager line items? Oh, Mayor Clark.
I had an actual, I don't know if it's a typo or whatever, but under your expenditures, under your personal services, when we did your contract, I remember that under the YMCA reimbursement, we gave you and other staff more flexibility and made it a fitness reimbursement?
Yes.
Is
We
that
just
correct?
didn't change the word. It's built into the system, and we should have, we actually
Okay,
talked
so
about
it
that
should
today.
be fitness?
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
These reports come out of the vision, and a lot of it is old history, and we don't necessarily always go in and change things. I mean, you'll see some areas that we actually changed. We replaced YMCA with recreational center, because it is a recreational center owned by the city. So we're trying to catch those, and that's one we didn't catch.
Okay.
Okay. Information technology. So, Mr. Crawford, if you can come up. He's in the back, I believe.
Double duty.
So when we get into departments that are managed by the respective department heads, they will come up because quite often the questions will be best answered by that department head or that manager. So a lot of these departments that we'll talk about, this is Brad's budget. My expectation of my department heads, they manage their departmental budgets. I have oversight, and certainly Kathy has oversight, but it's really their budget to manage. And if you have questions, the department director will probably be the best person to answer. So his budget, his IT budget, is also a small reduction. If you compare the adopted budget of 871, he's only proposing 847. So Brad, can you briefly explain why the difference?
Yeah, we had some larger expenses in the last few years. If you look at some of the 6,700 lines, we had quite a few expenses in the out years, and this year we don't have those this year, so that's probably the biggest reason for that.
How many FTEs do you have?
4?
4?
Brad, I noticed in your narrative, you were talking about hiring a senior network engineer. Is that a net change to your FTE?
That's 100% broadband funded, so
Oh,
it's
okay.
not a general
So
fund
that's not in
position.
general fund. Thank you.
If I could
I'll
add.
I'll
to
ask
that,
later.
Though, some of his expenditures have reduced because of this potential hiring of the system engineer.
Mm.
So he was able to cut back in some of his other operating supplies.
That's a good point. The other professional technical 6190 went down this year because of the hiring of that position,
Okay.
and it's a rehire actually.
So in similar vein of hiring an on-staff attorney, your outside services will go down
Totally.
because you don't have to pay for that.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other general questions on the IT budget? IT is part of admin.
Do you get no
Um,
revenue?
No revenue.
No revenue.
No.
Sorry.
Brad, I see we've gone from 12 online, 6428 internet access. We're going from 1200 to 6500. What's the difference with that?
That is usually it's usually air cards. But let me just double check here for you real quick. Yes, so that's air cards, and the city has quite a few iPads that we hand out for people to use. So those all have cell services attached to them. So air cards for laptops, but then also mobile devices.
Anything else?
Just a general question, have we had any major attacks on our system? That have,
Nothing that has been caused by us. No.
and we're able to handle, we haven't had any.
Is this portion of the budget, Brad, where you're investing in some more security, or is
Yeah,
that?
I guess I don't. Maybe I don't know what you're asking. We are investing in security all the time, and actually are increasing the budget this past year and this year. We're finishing a formal security audit this year, and then we have money that will cover the findings for maybe new software. The world of antivirus is changing, so we know that we're going to have to buy new antivirus software. So we're accounting for that in this coming year's budget. I don't know if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I'm just asking in general, how are we protecting ourselves?
Mhm.
Because not only do we have the city, we provide services for the school district, right,
Mhm.
through the broadband, and I'm just,
Broadband's a little bit different for a school district, but yeah, we're always on. We sent all of our all of our city staff through security awareness training this year. All of my staff went through some advanced computer security training this year. So I feel confident that we are secure. I don't know. I don't have any reason to believe that we're not. But it's always on the forefront of our project lists and what we're keeping up on.
And those projects you mentioned for increasing cybersecurity, those are included in your other professional and technical services
That's
budget?
that is almost exclusively 6705 in computer software. So antivirus upgrades, and then also some different change management software.
Trust me, Brad is always stressing the importance of protecting our resources and our computers and infrastructure. And we actually did do some recent training for all staff. There's about how many videos? They're short ones.
They're 24, I think.
24 separate, anywhere from 3 to 5 minute videos that staff went through and looked at, and the reaction that I heard from many staff was, oh my God, I don't want to do anything on the computer because of what the world is out there. I mean, they learned some stuff not only here in the workplace, but in their home environment as well. People are pretty darn creative out there, so.
Brad, I have a question.
Yeah.
We, at our council visioning session, had talked about putting more content on our cable access channel. And is the addition of that extra person or rehire going to allow you to do that? Or is that more a function of getting content from the high school students that volunteer or intern with us?
All of us, I mean, we all share roles to some degree, so we all take a little bit of, we all show up at meetings to record meetings, so to some degree, yes. We'll have more bodies to put at meetings if they want to be recorded, if those meetings are to be recorded. We had originally, when we were putting the budget together at a very high level, looked at maybe hiring maybe a part-time person to come in and be exclusively video producer, but quickly determined that it was not going to be feasible financially for the budget, so we didn't put that in the budget. But we continue to work with the school district. Just this week, they've got more content. They've got some content for us to post. We're waiting. Josh and I are working together to try to make sure that it's okay to post videos from kids that might have kids in them, and make sure that we're on a good legal standing that that's okay to do. And as soon as we get the green light for that, we'll post that. So yes, I mean we're still limited to the types of meetings that we can record. When events happen that are in the community focus, that we'll put those on there too.
So part of your wish list would have been an additional person to help with that.
Right.
If in the ideal world that we had lots more money.
And we were pretty creative. I mean, I reached out to a local city who has kind of a similar issue. I'll just say Wilsonville. They hire a consulting service to come in and record their meetings for them. And I said, they have the same issue we have. They want more content. But we talked about maybe sharing a person. But when we started doing the financials of the staff person, we both didn't have the budget to do it. So we kind of canceled that idea. But yes, a halftime video producer or even a quarter time would be great, because it truly is a different skill set. I mean, it really is. I mean, as a creative person who can do that, and that's not me. I would love to be, but that's not me.
So a number, it's a great way to describe it, Councilor Robinson, the wish list. There's a lot of positions that never got asked for, because realistically, you know, my team knows what the revenue situation is, and they're not going to ask for something that has no chance really of being funded next year.
Is there an intern program at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely on the, I mean, we can check that out, look into that. I have some ties over at George Fox, and I think they've got a video program, and that's one of the things that was going to look into, so.
Anything else for Brad and IT?
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get to human resources, which is now on page 13 and 14. There's a small bump up in HR. I'm going to let Mr. Pessimir answer any questions. This is essentially a departmental budget that he operates. One of the many hats he has as the assistant city manager is HR. And risk management is in here as well, right, Tom?
That's correct.
So he's going from 307 in the current year adopted. Nope, I'm looking at, yeah, it is 307. That's kind of weird. You lost 307 and your budget's 307. 307 to 342. So I don't know if you want to talk about what the increases were.
So, sorry, just checking my numbers here. I think probably the one change that was probably the biggest was in auto insurance. Last year, we had changed the way we did liability and auto insurance, where previously we had done auto liability under the liability account, and for some reason we missed it, so we actually didn't have auto liability insurance in last year's budget, so that's why you're seeing a major increase in that auto insurance line. We also have budgeted $10,000, which actually is coming from a grant, to do some work out on the stairs out here in the front of the lobby. So while it's showing up as an expenditure item, there's also grant funding to offset that cost.
On line 6519 by any chance?
Yeah.
That 10,000?
That's correct. That's correct.
And then the other line that seemed like an increase is 6190 from 3,000 to 12,000.
Yes, and so this is to do the long talked about compensation study. We've been talking about doing a compensation study for a significant period of time, and we're committed to getting that done this year to make sure that we're in line with all of our different positions. So that will be citywide, even covering the enterprise funds, to make sure that we cover every position.
And if I had
wanna
my
go
choice
back-
between the strategic plan, which I did have a choice, and that, this one is more important because it's way overdue.
I want to go back just a second. Kathy, can you talk about where that grant funding comes from again?
Yeah, I don't see it.
It's in the 22,500 up there under miscellaneous revenues.
4990 is
Yes, 4990. 7,500 of that is the grant funding that Tom's referring to for the stairs, and the balance of that is the anticipated safe dividend from workman's comp.
And that's highly variable. You can see some years it comes in, some it doesn't. So we've assumed $15,000 worth of revenue for this year. Obviously, if that doesn't come in, it will affect what we're able to do in other areas. So
Where's the grant from, that 7,500 grant?
it's actually comes from our insurance provider, which is CIS, and they have a matching grant up to $5,000, or they have a grant for up to $5,000. It's over a 3-year period, and then a matching grant from $5,000 to $10,000. So if we spend the full $10,000, they would give us up to $7,500, and then we'd be responsible for $2,500 to get that project finished.
How many FTEs?
Yeah.
One full-time HR tech, and then Tom, a portion of Tom is charged there also.
doesn't break it down.
What portion of Tom's is in there, do you know?
It's
5%?
maybe-
Yeah,
yes,
it's
a fairly low
yeah, it's a small amount.
percentage.
Yeah.
We can bring further information on that as far as breaking it down on individual departments.
That'd be great.
And getting back to the wish list, I would love to have more, maybe not a full-time, but certainly more time in HR in terms of a person. But can't afford it.
And you're saying that you just have a technician in there?
Well, it's not a tech,
Analyst?
it's an
HR
analyst.
And Tom, what's the change that from 6660 from 2,500 to 5,000? What's the difference in that? It doubled.
Yeah, we had some overlapping community events. This is really the city barbecue and the year-end party between the city manager budget and the HR budget, and so we were trying to clarify it this year and make sure it all got included in one place. So so there's probably a likewise reduction in the city manager budget to offset that.
And if you haven't noticed, a lot of these numbers and their titles roll across all the different departments. So it's really where we're charging the expenses to. And so you'll see that line if you go back to my budget. What's the number?
6660.
6640 and 6660. If you go back to my budget, 6640 and 6660 are in there as well. So it's kind of the numbering system.
0 for opposed.
Yes.
That's because they moved it, right?
There's
I moved some of
$2,500,
it
yeah.
and then I eliminated that. That's the Robin Hood contribution. Community support and promotion. So I'm just trying to explain the structure in terms of how this is set up. Any other questions on HR? Okay, I think we can get through the city attorney pretty quickly. Mr. Soper, if you can come up. So this is obviously a new department for us. 10 months of experience. And his proposed budget is actually, again, a small reduction, so want to explain why?
Sure. So this being a new department, this is the first year that this department's actually been operational. So last year's adopted budget was really just estimates. So that's where most of the differences are. In particular, under personal services, it was just an estimate about what it was going to take to staff the 2 FTE that we have in this department, and also in terms of the difference between adopted and projected. There's the fact that the legal assistant position has not been filled yet. I'm hoping to fill that starting June 1st. So we'll be paying about 1 month rather than I think it was budgeted at 8 or 9 months. So that's a big part of that difference. And then another significant change is in the legal services line item, 6130, and also temporary services above that. It had been budgeted to have a temporary legal assistant. We didn't end up doing that. And then the legal services cost was based on projections for what it would cost to transition from the previous law firm. It did not end up using nearly as much of their services during that transition as was anticipated. So that's a reduction there.
So Susan, that gets to your overall question is, where did you not spend money? All those little things add up.
Right.
Fantastic.
So,
And then I guess just one other thing to draw your attention to, 2 new line items that weren't previously budgeted for, 6472 and 6498. 6472 is software and maintenance fees. That is for a practice and case management software system. We currently don't have any software for managing my caseload. And then 6498 miscellaneous purchase services is for a legal research service such as Westlaw or LexisNexis. We currently don't have either of those as well. Any other questions? Okay.
Councilor Henderson. Councilor Henderson.
So is your legal assistant in the proposed budget?
Yes. For 12 months in the proposed budget, yes. So we're going
So
to
line
pay.
6010 is your salary plus that individual salary?
Correct.
Is she gonna work, is that person here, is she gonna work full-time?
Yes.
I know, I saw that too.
Yep, we did a salary survey for these positions in the area, and the range came back below what had been estimated previously.
and you have selected someone, correct?
Tentatively, we're doing a background reference check, and you know, this is an estimate based on, I believe, step 1 in that salary range. We may not be hiring at step 1, so this number will likely change after we have a finalized amount.
Would this be a paralegal for sure? or a
Legal
clerk?
assistant
Legal
is a
assistant.
position name. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're at 8:15. We have 2 departments left in general fund,
Mhm.
which would be kind of nice to get through the general fund, or not the general, admin division.
So we've got
We have
finance and court. If you're expecting, we've been hitting these other departments in about 5 minutes apiece. If you don't know of any large issues, we can forecast, go another 10 minutes and then go into the public
That's
hearing.
what I would suggest, is that we finish finance and court.
Okay.
Take a pause, because planning, building, and engineering is in the community development division, which
Mhm.
is separate from admin, and I know we're gonna have lots of questions in those 3 areas.
Yep.
Or I anticipate that there'll be more questions in
All
those
right.
3 departments.
All right, and I still think that leaves us with enough time to get the public hearing and public comments. Jean, we haven't received any additional forms for public comment, so I think that still leaves us enough time.
So, let's continue with finance. So the finance department overall is a small reduction compared to the current year. You see some significant savings in this year, though, Susan getting back. So if you look at total expenditures, we have an adopted budget of 604. We're only projected to spend 528. That's a significant difference. That's because we had a period of time without a finance director, and before I hired the consulting firm that we're using. So that's largely salary savings. Computer software, we projected to spend 66,000. We only spent 14.5 because we put that project on hold. So those are two examples in the finance department, that money that was budgeted that we didn't spend.
And Joe,
How many, yeah, how many FTEs?
There are
Same question.
4 or 5 FTEs.
So in the adopted budget for, let's see, 15-16, we talked about, at that time, Julie bringing in a part-time person to work on procurement and process
Contract
implement-
management.
Yeah, exactly. So that number for that potential person, that person wasn't never hired, correct?
No, that's not correct. Jean's position was
That's Jean.
half-time, and now she is full-time.
Full-time, okay, perfect,
As of
okay.
this year, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full-time people within the department.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
And that includes when we do have a new permanent person.
Yes.
Yes.
And you're on a contract basis?
Yes.
Correct.
That's outside of this?
No, it
No.
would be still coming out of this department.
Yes.
Um,
Coming out of other professional and technical services.
So once we select a permanent finance director, she will no longer be here on a contract basis. But until we do that, I need her.
And there should be expected some transition as well.
Exactly, yeah. We may have her be on board for a limited time to help that new person, whoever he or she is, transition.
And Joe, is the 60/10, does that include the new finance director's salary? Okay.
I did notice, to go back on talking about transition that Mr. Studer talked about, there's a line item on 6190 for 42,450. Is that for professional and technical services for your position? So would we expect some of that to carry over into the next fiscal year as we do a transition?
Hopefully not.
When this was done, we anticipated getting the finance director on
Yes.
board a little faster.
Mm-hmm.
So theoretically, if there is a delay in getting the finance director on, there's going to be savings in that
Right.
line
Okay.
item that will help
To
offset.
offset.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question on the audit fees? Did they go up because we had the new auditor and because she had all the extra questions? And
No, not at all. TKW usually has a built-in kind of a cost of living increase to their contract every year, maybe 3 to 5%. Yes, and so it's standard that within, the contract that they will always have that automatic increase.
And that was built into their contract with us.
And how many years are left on that contract again?
We extended it, or council extended it for a year.
Okay.
I will probably be bringing back to council sooner rather than later. What do you want to do in terms of that contract? Do you want to go out for an RFP to look at options, which this auditor would submit a proposal, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then the council could pick a new auditor or stick with this one. Or they could say, let's extend it one more year because your finance director didn't come on board as quickly and you've got some other things. So it's a timing question, but it's a council decision because the auditor works for the council
Makes sense.
and is selected by the council.
Thank you.
Any other questions for finance?
All right, so court. Now, court is part of finance. The finance director is responsible for the finance department, but is also responsible for the municipal court department. But we separate them. And there's 3 FTEs, and there's a court supervisor.
Yes.
So you see the revenue. We actually have some revenue here in terms of court that comes in, approximately about
Some.
$1,100,000 a year in terms of revenue. I think most importantly, we've been looking at departments that big minuses at that bottom line. This one has about $500,000 on the plus side.
So we're saving.
So the court is I hate to use the word profit center, but
Hmm.
the reality is it doesn't, it generates more income than what it costs to run the court. It's a significant amount. That's not unusual for cities that operate municipal courts. Quite
Are there any
honestly, thank
significant
goodness.
changes?
Hmm?
Any significant changes to operations
No, it's
this year?
actually fairly, it actually is a small reduction, 593 to 589. We anticipated that people may have a question. We just are wrapping up this court amnesty or program that we did with Newburgh. I think it ends May 15th. We've generated an additional $35,000 in revenue by doing that program. If we hadn't done that program, we probably would not have generated that 35,000. It had been a number of years since we had done the amnesty. We'll probably do that every 3 to 4 years, I think.
Question.
Excellent.
Do you have any statistics as to the makeup of fines and fees? You know, how many of them are planning or inspection related versus
Traffic.
traffic or
The fines and fees within court are all traffic related, court related. Fines and fees coming out of planning.
for other violations?
Yes, they would be accounted for within community development.
I don't think we're
And
they're
review.
generated any, so.
Yes.
So court is all generated by public safety.
So on the photo red light, which is 6188,
Go ahead.
is that pursuant to a contract that we are
Correct.
required to continue to pay the same amount for, and when is that up?
When is Red Flex up? Does it have a end date?
Forever.
It has automatic renewals. It probably has a date that was referenced along with that, but I could, it's gone through a couple different updates.
Counselor, we'll look into that and bring that back next week.
But it does have automatic renewals built into it, as well as a termination.
We'll look at that. But
Okay, and can
that's
you-
the cost of it. Each month, I approve a check
Right.
to Red Flex. That's the same
So
amount every
I guess
month.
my question is, over time, does that ever go down?
I believe it does. You want to come up, Chief?
I mean, it probably pays for itself with the right turn lane violations.
So when we did the most recent update and renegotiation of the contract, we went from a complicated formula to compensate Red Flex for the services to a flat fee. And so what that did is it saved just a ton of time in the finance side to calculate what the fee is going to be. And at the end of the day, it was a far better system for us to have because it was just based on a flat fee for services in a contract as opposed to not only the formula, but then also part of the formula was based on numbers. And this just feels a whole lot better. And because it has nothing to do with volume. So that's what that amount is. And it won't go down, nor will it go up until one side says, we want it to go up or we want it to go down. So it
Good.
just stays where it's at.
Yes, Mayor Clark.
So, my question was on fiscal year 13-14, the actual was 18,000 and it went to 216,000. Can you explain that? Because the revenue appears to be gliding along pretty at the same pace, and that is a huge jump.
It seems like it was about 3 years ago when we renegotiated the contract, so that may have been when that happened. And so that 18,000 is a remnant of the old system, the old contract. And beginning in fiscal 14-15 was probably the first full fiscal year where the new fee was in place. So without having it in front of me, but that's what I.
Or if you look at the line item below that,
190?
I believe the red light program was probably charged to that line item in previous years, and then we moved it up. We may have created
Oh, yeah.
6188 specifically to account for that. I'm guessing that's why. We
Yeah.
can confirm that, Mayor, but I'm guessing that's what
The
happened.
the other thing Tom just discovered is the 18,000 is 1 month of the 216. So that's also going to be part of it, is that we paid 1 month on that new system. So clearly that was the overlap year.
Chief, has the volume of citations stabilized, increased, decreased?
The last time I looked at the graph, we were still showing a trending downward. So, but it has stabilized some. We obviously at the beginning we had sharp decreases. But it's still decreasing. We're still seeing the results we want to see.
Which is behavior change and
Correct.
driving.
Correct. I mean, I said from the beginning I would love to see him go away and say, okay, we can. But I don't anticipate that. But we're certainly seeing the downward trend and the behavior modification that we had hoped for. So.
Except for the video that he shared with council today, if you had a chance to watch, which could have been a horrific crash if things would have happened a little differently. And both of those lights at the current 2 intersections, correct me if I'm wrong, as infrastructure improvements happen, those lights are going to have to probably be reconfigured, because Tualatin Sherwood someday, from Borchers down to Adams Street or Langer Farms, is going to be widened, and then Elwert is going to be changed. There's a meeting tonight at Town Hall, county's holding, that intersection is going to be potentially redesigned. So when those intersections get redesigned, how does that work in terms of working with ODOT in this case, Chief?
So, what we get from Redflex is they own the system and we're leasing their services in the system. So the good part about that is we're always guaranteed the latest and greatest technology. So they in fact have newer technology that they are just now starting to implement as systems get replaced. So when those projects do happen, if the system has to be moved or modified in any way, Redflex is involved with either like at TS and 99, ODOT in Washington County. There's already been communication about the fact that they're included in that loop of that project. And when the project is completed, then we will actually replace that with an even better system, but the system will go back in at that point. And then the same thing would happen at the 99 and Sunset Elwert intersection as well. So if at any point that went down for construction or redesigning the intersection, then that system would, or that equipment there would be replaced with the better equipment that they have at the time. So.
Councilor Harris.
Oh, go ahead.
I just had a question. On line 6010, the increase in the salary, it's more than the 0.7% increase. What's that attributed to?
There was a new clerk brought on in the 15-16 fiscal year, a replacement to his position, and she might have been brought in with a slightly higher salary or something, as she was an existing employee.
Yeah, she was in another department and moved over.
Into this department. So it's very likely she may have come in at a higher grade than what the previous person had.
Or wouldn't that be reflected in this year's budget too?
I think it was during this year.
Okay,
And then there was a
During the
gap
15-16
when no one was getting paid.
gotcha.
So
All right.
it kind of
It
balanced.
washed itself out. All right, thank you.
Councilor Harris was first, I think.
So I noticed in line 6450 as well as 6472, I'm assuming that the software maintenance fee didn't happen, and we hope that it will happen. I'm wondering what software that is for the court. And then also assuming travel and training is maybe related to that? Since the numbers kind of seem to carry over.
Travel and training, they did not have any conferences that they chose to attend in the 15-16 year. I spoke with the court supervisor about that and don't really know the projections. And she said there just wasn't anything that came up that was of interest to them that helped going on this year.
We'll take a look at that, because
Check
the
on
one,
that
the one, the negative 74, I'm like, what's that all about? So we'll
Yes,
look at that. I mean, it's not a large dollar amount, but that looks kind of
I was just curious, yeah, it looked kind of funky.
And we'll identify exactly what software it needs to.
Okay.
Counselor Henderson.
In the finance department, or in court, actually, is there a separate revenue center for Red Flex? Obviously, it's in 4710 fines, you know, but everybody is always focused on Red Flex. And as the chief said, you know, there's a downward trend, but about third year, we actually saw an upward trend. And I don't know if that would be of interest in this budget or in the future years. And since everybody's always very curious, I guess, about Red Flex.
We can certainly find out set of stats as far as how
Um,
much is attributable to.
Yeah, I'm certainly not
the radar,
asking
but yes.
staff to go create a cost center, I mean, a revenue center, but if we had an idea of percentage of Red Flex that is attributed to that $1 million in revenue, it might be an interesting.
Well, one of the advantages to going to the new software is we're going to add some line items that maybe in the current position is a little bit more difficult to do, and that may be one that we add.
Going forward.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Because if we can track it separately and you can see, okay, we can see how much fines are being generated by those two intersections of that camera system versus, you know, speeding tickets and other types of things. I think clarity is a good thing.
Any other questions?
Okay.
So Joe, I think in the interest of time, we should cut short the line by lines, and we should skip over the long-term debt review and go to the public hearing on state shared revenue.
Which I believe you have a statement to read.
I do. I will now open the public hearing on the use of state revenue sharing. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the public with an opportunity to submit testimony concerning the possible uses of state revenue sharing funds for fiscal year 2016-2017. The order of business will follow in conducting this hearing will be receive public testimony, questions from the committee. The hearing will then be closed and no further testimony will be received. Discussion by the committee. Any interested person may present testimony. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the testimony forms and submit them to the Finance Administrative Assistant. The committee chair will recognize those persons wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed through the committee chair. When you come to the microphone, please state your name, city of residence for the record, as this hearing will be recorded. Please speak clearly into the microphone. And so far, we have received no forms that indicate comments for state shared revenue public hearing.
For the FY 2016-17, the state shared revenues are estimated to be $210,000. These funds are considered unrestricted and accounted for within the general fund of the city. And a resolution will be taken to the city council at the time of budget adoption requesting a share of said revenues from the state. Formal process we need to go through to secure the revenues. A little bit up. We had 188,000, I believe it was budgeted last year.
Where is that on the general fund details?
It's in, if I went to, let me see, just a second. This is
4340.
combined though, this is general fund in total. And over here in your administration on page 5, and it's listed as 4340 state revenue sharing. It was 188 adopted in 15-16. We're anticipating receiving 197, and we budgeted 210 for 16-17.
Sorry, I don't know where that is.
Where's that again?
Sorry, where were you?
On page 5, and
Page-
it's number 4340.
5, number 4240?
4340.
Oh, there it
Gotcha.
is.
State
Okay.
revenue sharing.
Okay.
That is actually a very convoluted calculation that comes from the state based on the liquor taxes. And there's a very flat percentage that is based on our population. And then there's this very convoluted formula that is what they consider the state revenue sharing.
I believe Kathy sent in the last day or two what we receive, what all cities receive from the League of Oregon Cities, to how to calculate those.
Oh, okay.
Every
All
year,
right.
the league sends that out. And I think they actually sent it out once, and then they sent an adjustment out,
They did.
which lowered some
Yes.
of those. The speculation is because we are now a state that has recreational marijuana, some people are spending their money there versus liquor.
And is that where we can expect to see this state revenue sharing for marijuana under this line? I mean, if in fact
No,
we
in future
pass
years,
it, in future years, if in fact it passes?
No, it would be a
under-
separate tax.
Okay,
We currently get, as you can see in this same area, there's the state revenue sharing, the cigarette tax and the liquor tax.
yes,
If you are at a later time receiving marijuana tax, it would be a separate accounting for it, such as the liquor and the cigarette.
okay. I thought you said that the state revenue sharing was for the liquor tax.
It's part of.
Oh, part
There's two
of.
sections to the liquor tax.
Okay.
The one that's identified as liquor tax is based on per capita, on the population.
Yes,
This one that is the state revenue sharing is based on a various, it's a
convoluted.
very convoluted formula.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Thank you.
And if you are really interested, go back and look at what she provided,
Yeah, I will.
because it is pretty
Okay,
convoluted.
thank you. Thank you.
But it's a number that we don't come up with, we basically rely on.
Get
the
it from
state.
the, okay. Thank you.
All right, do we have any more questions from the committee?
We want to close the public hearing at some.
The public hearing is now officially closed. And should be is there any discussion from the committee? Seeing none. Let's move to the public comment section.
You have a couple people, I think, right?
Yes, we have two. I will now open the meeting to accept public comment on the 2016-2017 City of Sherwood budget. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the testimony forms and submit them to the Finance Administrative Assistant. The committee chair will recognize those persons wishing to speak, and any questions should be addressed through the committee chair. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and city of residence for the record, as this hearing will be recorded. Please speak clearly into the microphone. Please limit your testimony to 4 minutes. And I have two commenters scheduled tonight, or who have submitted forms already. The first one is Susan Dance. The chair recognizes Susan Dance.
Susan
Susan,
over
the
there.
podium.
I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Susan Dans, and I'm a resident of Sherwood. I'm speaking here as a private citizen who is also the elected secretary on the board of the Sherwood Robin Hood Festival Association. And as such, I volunteer many, many hours every year. And I want to point out to everyone that this is the 63rd annual festival, and that this festival is a significant cultural tradition that has engaged multiple generations of Sherwood residents. It's also an international event because this is the 60th anniversary of our archery tournament with Nottingham, England, and that's also a part of the festival. Something else that maybe we forget often is that the Sherwood Robin Hood Festival Association conducts the Winter Festival, which is the annual tree lighting on the first Saturday of December. We also, at both events, support all the community organizations who choose to participate in our community parades in both the summer and the winter events. We support things like the fundraiser for the Mr. Bowman competition at the Winter Festival. These are very, very popular events with many citizens participating and many people coming from out of town. The Robin Hood Festival is often mentioned by media, such as Money Magazine contacting us, finding a volunteer who participated in the festival, and they were featured there last year. I really want to speak to why we need to continue to support this festival in a predictable fashion. I know that it's been mentioned that there is a grant that we may look at. The festival would have to evaluate that grant to see what are the requirements, what is the predictability. But what I want to say is that this festival is a significant event. Our Maid Marian Court, they serve as ambassadors to other communities as well. They are engaged year-round in community service here. They will be helping with the Community Services Fair in about a week. We have 100 booths at the Summer Festival. Many of those are nonprofit booths and other organizations in Sherwood, not to mention supporting the business community. So this event is very significant. We're doing the mini float this year. We're also investing funds into that. I'm watching the time. And we do an annual scholarship as well. So this is a year-round endeavor, and it is a very important tradition that's been here for many years.
Thank you very much, Susan. And thank you for watching your own time. We have another public comment. The card submitted by Tony, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing the name, Tony Bevel. Thank you.
Good evening, and I'm going to give a lecture. No, not really, but I would like to present a $5,000 at least addition to your budget, and probably goes under the Street Capital Fund, and that is adding traffic calming devices. Now, there's been a lot of resistance, I think, to having these in these cities from the top down. With the amount of traffic that is now going on with the new high school on Shoals, Roy Rogers, the new big development that's going to be added on Roy Rogers, and with the water line, and just plain additional normal traffic we're going to see a lot of more traffic on between Roy Rogers and Edie Road. I live on Southwest Lindley. It has a big sign out there that says no through traffic, but I'm here to say it's different, and I'm sure the residents on my street would say the exact same thing. I don't expect, people to I do expect them to slow down, but come to a stop sign. Don't expect them to get out and genuflect, kneel at the stop sign, cross themselves, jump back in. But at least, slow down on that road. You may think I'm cranky, delusional, but I'm not. I mean, there are a number of citizens who agree the same thing. Spoke with my neighbor again this morning, exact same thing. So I think not only for, Southwest Lindley, for other streets that are experience the same thing. You did the same thing for the group up on Sunset Boulevard. I think, we deserve on that street the same. I think Sherwood as a whole should look at that again, put some money into it. I've seen the police for past couple of weeks, at least 5 times, motorcycle police plus motor vehicles parked in parking spaces on that street. That really works. But the point is, out of sight, out of mind. You add a traffic calming device, then you've got something there that's permanent and it will control the speeding traffic. And I'm not talking 40, 50 miles an hour, but it's a good rate. You're talking, I've seen 30 miles per hour. All right? So thank you very much. Please consider it.
Thank you. I received no other requests for public comment. So at this point, I will close the meeting to further public comments. And that leaves us with about 10 minutes left, maybe 15 if we go a little long. Does that give us enough time to do the long-term debt review?
Yeah, I think
Easily?
so. That's probably a good
Let's press
suggestion.
forward with that one.
Also,
And then also within the budget binder itself, if you go to the debt service and CIP section, the first 2 pages of this cover the long-term debt for the city of Sherwood and give a very good information on it. Basically, the city has 2 types of debt: general obligation bonds and full faith and credit debt. GO bonds are repaid from property tax revenue. The full faith and credit debt is repaid using multiple sources of funds. Could be water rates, parks SDCs, URA property taxes, depending on what the debt is incurred for. There is no new debt proposed for FY 2016-17. And as I say, further information is available on pages 33 and 34 of the proposed budget. The chart on the memo and the chart here within the budget does show you what is outstanding. Basically, on original loan amounts of $61 million, there is still principal outstanding as of 7/1/2016 of $43.3 million. And various years of payoff associated with each one of those loans. Of the loan that was taken out for the teen center expansion in 2001, 74.2% of that is reimbursed by the YMCA through the rental payments. And the payoff dates for the URA are based on the loan agreements. However, the plan is to pay off all URA debt by 2021 or 2022. Are there any questions at all on the long-term debt for the city?
Chair.
Sure, Councilor Robinson.
Who pays for the remaining portion of the principal on the teen center expansion?
That is coming out of general construction paid out of SDC.
Is there another comment over here? I thought I saw a hand.
So, this may not be the appropriate place, but again, I'm back on the first problem. That is a long-term obligation that we have, it's a liability, we're not calling it a debt. It's not showing up on, it shows up in the audit.
On the financial statement.
Right, on the financial statement. How are we proposing to handle that commitment?
Part of the difference that you're seeing here is budgetary basis versus GAAP basis. And the liability associated with PERS shows on the entity-wide statements, and it's considered on the GAAP basis. It is not a budgetary basis item. So that's why you're not seeing it in the budget.
Right.
Or you're not seeing it on the long-term debt here.
Right, and so my point is, that is something we have to handle, and we have to handle it from funds. We're not gonna get, the state's not gonna give us money to take care of that. We're not gonna get it from some big grant for that deficit. It's laying there, it's an obligation we have, and at some point, we have to address the obligation. For last year, we were at 2 million, we're probably what, like 2.4?
Remember, that's going to get reevaluated every single year depending upon the demographics of the employees of the city.
Right.
So it's a constantly moving number.
Right, but there's still, I mean, it's never gonna go down to zero.
There's a lot of factors involved in that.
But, yeah. And
Correct
so-
me if I'm wrong. I'm hearing, don't we have to pay that at some point, and shouldn't that be included in the budget? Is that what you're saying?
What-
And it seems like, correct me if I'm wrong, we're not paying attention to it.
No, what I think we are paying attention to is the minimum payments that PERS is telling us we have to do. We are totally paying attention to that, and that's in the budget. We have a long-term liability out there of over $2 million that's unfunded, that we don't have a new source of revenue to come through. We've got to manage that somehow, and we've known about that already for a few years, and we haven't done anything. We've just let it lay out there. We need to address that. It seems, and what I'm saying is, how do we address that? It's not a specific debt that we've taken out, but it's something that not only do we have to address in what the liability is right now, but in our budgeting that we do for our personnel and services, that always has to be a consideration because you're adding more cars on the freight train. You know, when you add, and you're adding more long-term liability, but you're not taking care of that unfunded problem. And I'm not saying let's take care of it all right now. I'm saying let's have a process, let's have some kind of a system so we're addressing that because we're the only ones that can address it. No other town's going to pay it for us. The employees aren't going to say, hey, don't worry about it. We have to take care of it. So
That would be a reservation amount on your fund balance. That is how you would start more or less that savings.
And then there's two things I think because of the time. One, you have the PERS information that I think will be very valuable. Maybe that's where we start next week. And I think we should go back and talk to our auditor, and we may not be able to have her come and explain, because it's a new requirement that all jurisdictions are dealing with. In terms of what are the best practices? What should we be doing, if anything, that we're not doing? Because that's what I'm hearing, quite honestly. We're not doing what, in your opinion, is enough, because it's there.
right.
So what are we doing about it? That's a
Right.
consistent. I've heard that from you for a year, quite honestly.
Exactly.
Susan. So, and if you have that question, others have that question. So I think we can maybe start. We don't have enough time in 5 minutes to really unravel that.
Right.
In depth. But I think we can. Your analysis of what's the impact, which quite honestly I'm more concerned about, real dollars next year.
Yep.
Which is that minimum fund.
Which is that quite honestly, of the two, it's not that I'm not concerned about what you're raising. I'm more concerned about the immediate impact next year,
Right.
which is about $260,000 more, which is a lot of money
Right.
when you think about it. Let's talk about that next time, and then let's loop back with the auditor and see if we can get some additional information to address your concern.
That'd be great, because everybody understands credit cards. If you're only paying a minimum balance on a huge credit card, you know that sometime you gotta pay that piper.
Counselor Kuipers.
Yeah, just a real quick question. I recall a discussion last budget last year, that the new application, the new program for the accounting program, finance software, would have the ability to address and project out budget beyond several years out. And it was just a lot more flexible than what we had. And I'm assuming that the kinds of things that Susan's talking about planning for that, is included in that, so it's easily pulled up and recognized and manipulated in some way, so we can have that.
It'll
in
probably be helpful,
discussions.
but it won't get to your question, because this, again, it's a new standard.
Right, but
that-
it's in it's right there on paper where you can look at it and go, we need to talk about this or something.
Right.
And
I
quite
just don't wanna,
honestly,
what
you're saying, in my understanding, because it's new, I don't think anyone's necessarily dealing with it.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
and
and you're
I don't
saying
want-
you need to deal with it.
Yeah, I don't want us to have a false sense of security that we can do a project here, a big thing here, we can, wait until 3 years for the art center to get a lease. We
Right.
can't, because we've got money, and then we also need to pay attention to it on, when you're talking about your strategic planning for the organization of the business itself, what extra employees are causing extra burden, and how do we manage that with the services?
So I think, I hear what you're saying. I think we can do some work between now and next week to try to
Great.
address both and bring that back, because.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't think PERS is gonna give us an extra bill, are they? They're just gonna adjust it every year.
They adjusted.
Every 2 years. Every 2 years, so, I mean, the only thing we could do, I guess, is have a rainy day fund for whatever the increase is.
Yep.
But, I mean, it's not like we can pay it off today. I mean, even if we had the money.
I don't know who we pay.
Yeah, who would?
No, I mean, they gave,
Quite honestly, I mean.
they gave two choices at PERS. Either you pay an extra into PERS, or you have a committed fund in your
Right.
town. And nobody suggested suggesting that we're gonna give that away to someone. It's always gonna stay with the city of Sherwood.
What you're saying is you want a dedicated fund towards that future liability.
I'm saying that that's what PER's recommendation is.
Yeah.
That's what they've been recommending to everybody. Start putting your fund together.
I'm just trying to clarify that for everybody.
Yeah.
so.
So I hear you, and like I said, we've got some time to work on that, and like
Yeah.
I said, I want to go back to our auditor and ask the question, what could we be doing to prepare for that we're not doing now?
I mean, it will certainly help offset whatever increases we stand to face in the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
There are some mechanisms out there that some of other cities are using, whether it be PERS bonds or designation of fund balance. And setting monies aside. It's just that the calculation of that unfunded liability has just recently been implemented and reformatted, more or less. So it's very volatile. It is very volatile.
Well, and here's the good news too. If we have a great excess, if we find ourselves with a great excess and we still have control of it, that's a city council thing of, hey, we've got an excess, give it, put it back, but let's just make sure that we're taking care of our liabilities so we don't overspend in other areas.
We are right about at time at 9 o'clock. I'd like to make sure that we have any questions regarding the long-term debt memo and presentation from Kathy closed up before we move to recess. Are there any other questions about the long-term debt section?
I just have a very brief question. Are, and this is specific to the YMCA, is there an option for them to terminate their lease agreement?
Sure.
So they don't, technically, it's not a lease, it's an
It's not a
operating
lease.
agreement. They
Okay.
can terminate. Both parties have to give a year's notice.
Okay, so, okay. Was just curious because,
So our notice would have to be by next October 1st on either party.
right, okay, that was my only question.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. The Budget Committee will be in recess until May 19 at 6 p.m., same room here. And we will resume with the planning section of the departmental line-by-line information.
Probably start with PERS.
So maybe we'll start with PERS?
Yeah.
Well, we'll resume the departmental line-by-line at planning somewhere in the agenda. All right, thanks. We're in recess.